What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Minato and Kushina begs Naruto to return? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. In the backyard of the Namikaze estate, Minato Namikaze and his wife Kushina Uzumaki were teaching their son Menma and daughter Narumi the different techniques in their arsenal. While the training was serious, the family was enjoying its outing as any complete family should. The only problem was that the family wasn't complete. Staring at the perfect family from his room window, 10-year-old Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze sat watching and letting thoughts of the past resurface. Flashback 3 years ago. Naruto sat with his brother and sister beside him, anxiously waiting for his parents who had told them they had a big announcement. His mind was going crazy just thinking about what it would be, but deep down he knew what the announcement was. Their training would begin today. This would be a welcome change because lately his life had been going downhill. Naruto had started to realize that his siblings' wants were taking precedence over his all-day everyday. He at first believed he was just overthinking things, but soon discarded that after seeing how the villagers treated his family with respect but ignored him. The very same could be said about his godparents. Jiraiya would come by when he could to see his godchildren and teach them a few things while he was there. He spent most of his time with Menma and had stated on many occasions that he couldn't wait until he could take him as an apprentice. Not once had he spoken to Naruto. Tsunade lived in Konoha and worked as head of the hospital, so she made an appearance much more often but spent her time mostly around Narumi and treated her the same way that Jiraiya treated Menma. Another godparent that had never spoken to Naruto. Minato and Kushina walked into the room, bringing Naruto out of his thoughts to make their announcement. Minato stepped forward and spoke. "Now kids, your mother and I have discussed this and we both feel that it is time to teach you our family techniques and begin your training. I will train you in ninjutsu and taijutsu while your mother will train you in the use of chakra chains, kenjutsu, and controlling the Kyuubi's chakra." He finished with a smile which quickly turned to a frown as his oldest raised his hand. "Yes, Naruto?" Minato asked disinterestedly. Naruto frowned for a second at his father's tone but continued. "Will I be involved in this family training too?" he asked. Minato turned to look at Kushina, who frowned, and then back at Naruto. "No, Naruto, you will wait until the academy and learn the basics there. Your siblings have to learn to control the Kyuubi's chakra, so we won't have time to teach you as well," he answered, making Naruto's emotions begin to rise. "Well, what about having a clone teach me or leave me a scroll or something?" Naruto, stop. "Your father and I decided this together. You will wait until the academy, is that clear?" asked Kushina harshly. Naruto curled his fists and nodded silently. End flashback. That moment in his life showed him that his parents cared more for his brother and sister, but it was another moment that showed him that they simply didn't care about him. Flashback Namikaze triplets' 10th birthday. Naruto was sitting in a back corner of the living room watching as all of the guests conversed and gave their presents to his brother and sister. After so many years of the same old thing, it didn't affect Naruto as much, but it still hurt him. To know that he could die and no one would care was a horrible realization that Naruto just wasn't ready to accept. At least not yet. All the guests stopped talking when their Hokage and his father stepped forward. "I would first like to thank everyone for coming to my children's birthday party. I believe that my sensei Jiraiya and Tsunade have something for you too before I make my announcement," he said, looking at Menma and Narumi while moving to the side. Everyone watched as both Jiraiya and Tsunade walked towards the two with large scrolls in their hands and smiles on their faces. "Menma, I have watched you grow up and am proud to be able to offer you the Toad contract, which will help you immensely with your future career as a shinobi," he said with a smile, handing the contract to an excited Menma. Immediately afterwards, Tsunade walked up to Narumi. "Narumi, you will be a great ninja in the future and I would be honored if you would sign the slug contract to help you in your future career," she said to Narumi, who practically snatched it out of her hands. After all the clapping and cheering was done, Minato stepped up. "Now I have an announcement that affects both of you. As of now, Narumi will become the heir to the Uzumaki clan and Menma will become heir to the Namikaze clan," he finished with a smile next to his wife. Before anything could be said or anyone could cheer, the sound that broke the brief silence was that of glass breaking. As everyone looked back to find the source of the sound, They were surprised to see Naruto with a broken glass being held tightly in his hand and a look of pure rage on his face. Saying nothing, he stomped up to his room and slammed the door. The party resumed shortly after. End flashback. It was now nighttime as he had spent all day reminiscing about his past. Chuckling, he thought that it was a bit ironic that all the memories he had of this place would make it easier to initiate his plan to leave. It was now midnight and everyone was sleeping. Naruto sneaked out of his house and headed for the gate. He had planned everything out. All he had to do was escape the clan compound, which was easy enough. Next he would have to distract the guards long enough for him to escape. Lucky for him, he had the perfect jutsu needed. It was simple really, he just created a shadow clone which he learned by watching his father teach his siblings. The shadow clone, after being created, immediately ran to alert its presence to the guards. 5 seconds is all it took for the 2 guards to completely abandon their posts and chase after the clone. With them gone and the clone under orders not to dispel until it had bought enough time, Naruto rushed out of the front gate of Konoha, leaving the place in which he was never acknowledged. Forest in Fire Country. Naruto was walking through the forest still in the Land of Fire. It had been 1 month since he had left Konoha and he already viewed it as an improvement. As he moved through the woods, he heard the sound of metal clashing. Sneaking towards the sound, he peeked from behind a tree and watched as a group of bandits were attacking a blue-haired woman all at once. As they attacked, she struck them down with her sword, which was a long, thin, silver blade with a golden handguard. Moving quickly from opponent to opponent, she ended it by spinning quickly with her sword, slicing anyone who came near her. Naruto watched in awe at her skill. After the last bandit had fallen, she looked around and then fell to a knee, panting. As she regained her breath, she looked up and towards the tree that Naruto was hiding behind. She sighed as Naruto quickly stopped peeking and hid behind the tree. With his eyes closed, he kept quietly chanting, "Please have not seen me. Please have not seen me. You know, if you want to hide better, it might be best not to talk out loud," the blue-haired sword wielder suggested, interrupting his chant. Opening his eyes, Naruto got a better look at the woman. She was about 6 feet tall, slim, and had long blue hair that reached past her shoulders but was tied in a single braid. A gray skin-tight jumpsuit covered her. She looked to be about 20. Her sword sat in its sheath on her hip. Finally he looked into her eyes. He was shocked that he saw a warmth and kindness being directed towards him, as it was a new experience. He was silent as she smiled at him. "So kid, what are you doing out here?" she asked softly. Nothing really, I was just walking, that's all," Naruto replied quickly, which made the woman roll her eyes. "You know kid, you are a very bad liar, but I guess I'll let it slide for now." "So tell me kid, what's your name?" she asked. Naruto pouted a little at being called a liar but responded to her question, sensing no malice from her. "My name is Naruto." The brunette giggled at his pout. "Well Naruto, I'm Sarah, nice to meet you," she said, holding out her hand. Naruto took it, shaking the whole time. Sarah noticed this and decided to clarify everything. "Look Naruto, what you just saw, you don't have to worry about me doing that to you." "That," she said, pointing to the many bodies that lay behind her, "was self-defense." Naruto nodded quickly. Though he was shaken up from seeing his first massacre, he still was in awe at her skill. As she started walking away, an idea came to mind. "Teach me," Naruto yelled out, which made Sarah stop in her tracks. Looking at the ground, she was silent for a whole minute before turning around to answer him. "Why?" she asked, looking into his eyes to determine if his answer would be truthful or a lie to appease her. Naruto looked at her and replied with a fire in his eyes. "I want to be acknowledged, respected, and appreciated. I want to show everyone that I am worth looking at," he answered, no longer just answering her but himself as well. Sarah crossed her arms in thought and picked up on what he said in his speech. "What about your parents, family, friends, home?" she asked, interested in his answer. Naruto clenched his fist but his gaze never wavered. "I have no one that I can call a friend in my village, and family refuse to even act like I exist. The way I see it, I have nothing to lose and everything to gain," he said with a smirk. Sarah looked at him for a long moment before laughing loudly. "Kid, I will admit that you've got guts to see someone kill a bunch of guys and then ask to join them," she responded with a smile. "Alright kid, come on." Naruto smiled, his first genuine smile in a long time, and rushed over to the woman. Time skip 1 year. Forest in Fire Country. You're putting too much force into it and it's making you too slow, chastised Sarah as she fought blade to blade with her apprentice Naruto. Yeah, I know, I guess I'm just excited for tonight, he said with a smile before blocking a slash from his blue-haired teacher and jumping away from her. Sarah rolled her eyes at his remark. I know, but for now you need to focus because I could have been done killing you by now. You're better than this, so show me, she yelled, hoping it got through to her student who had quickly become like a brother to her. Fine then, he yelled back before gathering his katana in a reverse grip, smirking. Sarah pulled her sword near her face with a smirk, as well as the two prepared for a swordsman's end. Faster than one could see, the two appeared on the opposite side of each other, not facing each other. Both held their stances until Naruto fell to his knees with a slash across his bare chest. Sarah smiled before she unexpectedly fell with a weaker slash across her stomach that tore through her jumpsuit. "Aw, damn it, not again," Sarah shouted before going over to check her shirtless apprentice who was catching his breath. Walking behind his kneeling form, she put her sword to his neck and whispered, "I win." Time skip midnight. Well, looks like it's about time, Sarah announced to Naruto, who was practically jumping up and down in excitement. Over the past year the boy had grown. Now the 11-year-old stood at 5 feet tall and was as muscular as an 11-year-old could be. He had learned a lot from Sarah, who was just one in a line of legendary swordsmen. She was the 10th swordsman and her title was the Aqua Knight, as her sword and herself grew more powerful in the water. When it came to sword skills, no one was near as good as one who received their title the way Sarah did. This line of swordsmen were always the best, and soon Naruto would join as the 11th swordsman. Throughout the training, Naruto learned every special technique of each of the previous swordsmen in their unnamed group from Sarah, as she had learned from the 9th swordsman. It took him very little time to learn all she knew, which reinforced Sarah's multiple conclusions that the boy was special. She taught him chakra control, sensing, and usage, but did not teach him jutsu. Sarah sighed and looked at Naruto, who was staring at the sky. Tonight he would receive his individual sword, which would make him almost unbeatable in swordsmanship. When the clouds moved and the moon shined bright, Naruto felt something in him telling him to reach out. When he did, he watched as a flash blinded Naruto from seeing his outstretched hand. When the light died down, Naruto was holding his sword. His real sword. The blade itself was huge. It was about 5 feet in length and half as thick as Naruto's body. The blade was curved in a way that heavily resembled a crescent moon. The color of the blade was black, with the sharp side of the blade a shining silver. The handle was pure gold with a crescent moon in the center. As Naruto admired it, Sarah decided to speak up. "So you've attained your title. Naruto, you now hold the title, the Lunar Soldier, as it has been made evident by your blade," Sarah said seriously as Naruto paid close attention to her. "Now you are probably wondering how you are holding something like that so easily," she said, smiling when he nodded yes. "That is your sword and will be answered to you and you only. It has perfect balance and you will be able to lift it in any way because it answers to you. Now, unlike my sword, your sword is a defensive sword, as you can see by the shape and size," she explained. "I understand, Master," Naruto said as he kneeled, which shocked Sarah since she had never been called Master, just teacher or sis. Smiling, she told him to get up and follow her. As Naruto rose with his sword still in hand, he remembered what Sarah had told him about this moment and about summoning his sword. Smiling, he flicked his sword up into the sky and it vanished, waiting to appear when it was called upon again. He followed Sarah to a nearby lake. Sarah looked at him with proud eyes. "I knew you were special from the day I met you, Naruto. In this past year I've watched you grow and have taught you everything I know. Now there is one thing left for me to give you," she said, smiling, and cut the right sleeve off of her jumpsuit, revealing a tattoo of a dragon wrapped around her arm. Naruto watched as Sarah bit her left thumb and rubbed the blood on the tattoo, which glowed and mist covered the ground and water. As the water began thrashing and the ground began shaking, Naruto watched as a giant dragon-like serpent rose from the water. The creature was bluish-gray with an ocean blue head and piercing yellow eyes. Sarah smiled as she looked upon her summon. The serpent lord of the ocean, Leviathan. He was 3 times the size of Jiraiya the Sannin summon Gamabunta and could defeat even the mightiest Biju. Of course the serpent had not revealed its full size, which would be too much for a lake to handle. The serpent moved its head down to meet the two. "Sarah, it has been a long time," Leviathan commented as softly as a giant water serpent could. "Hello, old friend. I am sorry for my absence, but it's time," she responded with a small smile while Leviathan slowly nodded. Naruto, who was watching in awe of the greatness that was before him, he was brought out of his wonder by Sarah. "Naruto, I would like for you to sign the water serpent contract, but only if you want to." Sarah smiled as she could tell he wanted to jump up in joy but stayed respectful in the presence of the great beast that watched the events that were to unfold. Nodding quickly, she instructed him to apply his blood to her tattoo in order to become a summoner. When he did, the tattoo glowed then disappeared off of her arm. Before Naruto could ask where it went, he felt a searing pain on his right bicep as the tattoo that was formerly on Sarah has transferred itself to Naruto's arm. Looking down, he regained his composure at seeing the tattoo on his arm. "Does this mean that I am a summoner?" he asked expectantly. Sarah nodded. Leviathan then saw the need to explain the contract himself, so he turned his gaze solely on Naruto, who immediately focused on what the Serpent Lord had to say. "The water serpent contract is one that cannot be held on a simple scroll, so we form our contract on the summoner's body. We are one of the most powerful creatures in existence, so you must summon us accordingly. We do not fight small skirmishes. Our abilities are not limited by water, we can also be summoned on land as well. You may summon us using the standard hand signs for a summon, but it will cost you more chakra than most summons. We will only allow one summoner at a time, and the only way it can be passed on is willingly by the current summoner. Now child, make the hand signs and summon your personal serpent." Naruto nodded and did as asked. Instead of smoke appearing, which was normal for summons, mist swarmed into a mini tornado, causing Naruto to look away. When he looked back, he was staring at a serpent about half the size of Leviathan but looked almost identical to him. "Greetings, I am Levios, son of Leviathan, and your personal summon," he said with a grin, revealing a mouth full of teeth that could cut through steel like a knife through butter. Naruto liked him immediately. "Hello Levios, my name is Naruto and I am honored to be able to summon you," he said both respectfully and excitedly, to the shocking amusement of the two serpents, who then left in a bed of mist but not before looking up at the clouded sky. Right when Naruto was about to ask where they went, his senses went on alert and he jumped just in time as Sarah missed with her sword. "Sarah, what are you doing?" a confused Naruto yelled out. Sarah stood tall. "Naruto, tonight you became the 11th swordsman, the lunar soldier, and the water serpent summoner. In order to complete this, you must kill me in this battle right here right now," she responded as rain started to fall. Naruto stood there with tears in his eyes as the rain started falling. "No, you're all I have. Without you, I'm all alone. I won't kill you. I refuse," he shouted, letting his tears run. Sarah hated to do this to Naruto, he was so innocent, yet she was going to thrust him into a cruel and unforgiving world with no one. But she would be damned if she didn't give her most precious person the strength to make it in this world. "Naruto, you must fight me with everything you have in order to attain your full potential. Once you do, then I will know that you will be safe. I know you don't want to do this and I'm sorry for thrusting you into this, but it must be done," she said, crying. "Now fight me with everything you have or I'll never forgive you," she yelled and ran towards him. Listening to her reasoning strengthened his resolve and he called his sword. When the blade appeared in his hand, he ran towards Sarah and the two clashed blades. Fighting with everything they had, the two slashed at each other as the rain fell harder. While Sarah was faster, Naruto had reach and power. As the two fought, Naruto drove Sarah away from the water, which would have given her a huge advantage, and further into the forest. Eventually the two came to a standstill holding their blades against each other, but Sarah twisted her body to land a strike at his leg, forcing him down. "Well, I guess you won't be able to beat me. Shame, guess I'll have to look for someone else," she said, frowning disappointingly, but the frown was replaced with a small smile at her student's next words. "Look up, teacher," he responded. When Sarah looked up, she saw the full moon and knew it was over. The next thing she felt was a mix of pain and pride as she looked down to see Naruto's blade driven into her chest. As she fell, Naruto caught her and laid her down. Naruto watched as the life left his teacher's eyes. Sarah died with a smile, but it was little consolation. Naruto didn't fight the tears that came and repeatedly cursed himself and Sarah that night. When morning arrived, Naruto left the battle scene with a heavy heart. Sarah was given an ocean burial by Naruto and the water serpent Leviathan. Now it was time for Naruto to return to Konoha. Konohagakure no Sato. Minato sat in his office fighting every cage's worst enemy. Paperwork. Deciding to take a short break, he got out of his seat to turn around and look at the village of Konoha. He smiled as he watched everyone going about their day as usual. That smile disappeared when his eyes landed on a family of 3 having a picnic. Just the mother, father, and son sitting with a basket. This sight cut into Minato's heart. He thought back to when his family's life fell apart. Flashback 1 month after Naruto has left. Minato, Kushina, Narumi, Menma and come into the living room of the house after finishing training. You two made some great progress today, so how about I take the whole family to eat Chirakus for ramen? Suggested Minato, almost having to cover his ears at the children's response of, ramen. He smiled and then thought about the one person missing. Naruto. The two hadn't spent much time together lately, so he decided in that moment that a lunch with the family would be a good start to getting more familiar with his son. Okay, well, everyone wait here while I get Naruto, Minato said, shocking Kushina because she too had forgotten him so easily. Meanwhile, Menma and Narumi looked at each other then started laughing. Very funny, Dad, that failure's gone, Menma said, laughing while his sister did the same. Minato frowned, as did Kushina. What do you mean gone? Is he at a friend's house? Kushina asked, which only served to make the two laugh harder. Narumi finally calmed down enough to answer her mother. Friends? Who would want to be friends with that loser? He's been gone. Hopefully he's gone for good, she said, smiling. Minato and Kushina shared a look of horror before Minato flashed out of the house and into his office, where he called for a search for his son done by his best Anbu. After 3 months, he was forced to call off the search. End flashback. Minato realized how bad he had neglected Naruto but couldn't do much, so he entrusted the search to his sensei Jiraiya, who held regret in his heart as well. When word made it around the village, the overall feeling was regret and sadness because they never took the time to even notice the Hokage's firstborn. Kushina took it hardest. Ever since he left, she lost her happy, joyful demeanor. She continued to train her children, but they were forbidden from bad-mouthing Naruto. She slept in Naruto's room every night, crying herself to sleep. During the training of their 2 remaining children, Minato and Kushina began to see exactly who their children were. They were arrogant, as everywhere they went, they flashed their name and demanded what they wanted. They were selfish, as they never even tried to help others in need. After discovering this, Minato and Kushina realized what a horrible mistake it had been to take being clan heir away from their son. With that, they promised that when Naruto returned, they would treat him the way he should have been treated. Respect and love that every child deserved from their parent. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of knocking. Getting back in his seat, he announced that whoever wished to enter may do it now. His jaw dropped when one of his chunin entered with the boy who had been clouding his thoughts since he realized he left. His son, Naruto. Lord Hokage, this boy claims that he wishes to join our village and wished to speak with you, the chunin explained, earning a glare from Naruto for his boy comment. Minato quickly nodded. Thank you, you may go now and tell my secretary that we are not to be disturbed, he ordered, never taking his eyes off of his son. When the chunin left, Minato immediately went to Naruto to hug him but was stopped when he held up a hand, halting him. I'm afraid that I must ask that we keep this meeting professional and brief, Lord Hokage, Naruto said coldly, causing Minato to flinch and his heart to break a little. He nodded sadly and motioned for Naruto to take a seat. As Minato looked over his son, he realized how tall he was and how mature he looked. Naruto was the spitting image of his father. Naruto was wearing a black sleeveless shirt with dark blue pants, black fingerless gloves and black boots. Both seated, Minato asked the question that had been on his mind for the past year and a half. Naruto, where have you been, son? He asked. Naruto stiffened before responding. I have been training in the forests of Fire Country and believe that I am ready to take the genin exams with this year's class. While I do not know any jutsu except for the Shadow Clone Jutsu, the Transformation Jutsu, and the Substitution Jutsu, my other skills should put me well above qualified to take and pass the test, he said. Naruto had decided that while he wouldn't hide his skills, he wouldn't brag or explain them unless prompted to do so. Minato furrowed his brow when he heard Naruto's explanation. Are you sure, son? The class that will be graduating this year is mainly composed of clan heirs, so it might be difficult to pass, and there's also the fact that you've received no formal training." Minato stopped when Naruto leveled a cold glare at him. "While I appreciate your concern, Lord Hokage, I assure you that I will pass regardless of my opposition," he spat. Minato sighed. Maybe he should let his son take the test. After all, the worst that could happen is that he wouldn't pass. Making his decision, he nodded and told him that he would see to it that Naruto was allowed to take the Genin exam and that the academy would actually begin in a few minutes. Minato wrote on a piece of paper and handed it to Naruto, telling him that it would get him in for the exam. He also suggested that the two walk together, but Naruto quickly declined before getting up and making his way to the academy. Minato sighed sadly, but quickly smiled. His son was back, and no matter how long it took, he would get him back. Konoha Ninja Academy. Iruka Amino was giving a speech to his students before he started the Genin exam when a blonde boy walked in handing him a note from the Hokage himself. He was too busy reading the note to look at who had given it to him. After reading the note, Iruka's eyes went wide before looking at the boy who had taken his seat in the back corner of the room away from everyone else. "Okay class, we have someone who will be taking the exam with us today." Everyone welcomed Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, he said before a kunai flew near and cut his cheek. "Just Naruto will do," Naruto said with no emotion. After this display, everyone was watching him, two children in particular. Narumi and Menma Uzumaki Namikaze were fuming that the worthless nobody of a brother was back. "Iruka-sensei, why does he get special treatment?" whined a boy named Kiba, who obviously thought it was not fair that he had to sit through Iruka's boring lectures for years, but this kid comes in and gets to take the Genin test without such torture. "Naruto has a note from the Hokage himself allowing it, so be quiet, Kiba. Now the exam has 3 parts which will be tested through taijutsu matches, ninjutsu demonstration, and the paper test you are receiving now," explained Iruka while his assistant Mizuki finished handing out the last of the exams. "Now that everyone has their test, begin," shouted Iruka. It took Naruto 10 minutes to complete the pitiful excuse of an exam, and he was forced to wait for another 50 minutes while everyone else finished before they were let outside. The academy training ground had a wooden board that ranked the students in who was best at taijutsu. Naruto scanned the board and was surprised to see that his idiot siblings held the top spots. Naruto was brought out of his thoughts when Iruka asked for volunteers to begin the taijutsu portion. Menma quickly volunteered, but not before issuing a challenge. "I want to fight Naruto. Maybe then he'll realize how pathetic he really is," all the while smirking while the rest of the students quickly agreed. "Naruto, do you accept Menma as your competitor?" Iruka asked, gaining a short nod in response. As Naruto and Menma entered the ring, Naruto knew what would happen. Today, he would humiliate his brother in front of all of his friends. Today, he would show Menma how much of a child he truly was in this adult world. When Iruka gave the signal, Menma quickly started attacking Naruto, thinking it would be over quick. His confidence quickly died after his pathetic brother dodged his strike. Then the next, and the next, and the next. Finally Naruto had enough. He dodged one last punch by simply moving to the side and quickly planted his fist in Menma's stomach, raising him off the ground. With Menma still on his arm, Naruto spoke. "Years of training from 2 of the famous Sannin, the last Uzumaki from Whirlpool, and perhaps the most powerful Hokage in Konoha history, and this is what you have to offer. I must say that I am thoroughly disappointed, especially since you are supposed to be the best in your class at taijutsu." "Well, it's my turn now, but don't worry, I'll make it quick," Naruto said coldly before throwing him 10 feet off the ground. When Menma started falling and reached about 3 feet from the ground, Naruto swung his leg right into the side of his head, sending him flying into a nearby tree. Everyone was at a loss for words. The son of the Hokage had just been destroyed by the clan reject. Iruka quickly declared Naruto the winner and told Mizuki to take Menma to the hospital. As the matches went on, Iruka couldn't stop thinking about Naruto. He had been playing with Menma the whole time, and Iruka could see that Naruto hadn't even tried. 3 moves and Menma was out, and he knew that the kick Naruto used was not even half of the strength that he could have used. That type of power in someone so young scared Iruka, but not as much as the dead look in Naruto's eyes throughout the match. Eventually the taijutsu matches were over and the students were led back into the classroom. No one spoke. The way that Naruto had finished Menma like he was nothing was more than a little unnerving and made everyone keep their distance. As they all sat down and waited for their names to be called for the next demonstration, no one spoke. Naruto's name was the first one called. Naruto calmly rose from his seat and followed Iruka into the next room. Okay Naruto, I need you to make 3 clones, use the substitution jutsu, and use the transformation jutsu, Iruka stated somewhat nervously. Naruto just rolled his eyes and began making 3 shadow clones, substituting himself with a nearby chair, and transforming into Iruka. He took his headband, ignoring the congratulations of Iruka. Naruto walked out of the academy with his headband tied around his arm. As he appeared outside, he noticed all the families waiting for their child to come out with their headbands. There was Shikaku Nara, Inoichi Yamanaka, Shusa Akamichi and their wives, Sume Inazaka, Makoto Uchiha and Itachi Uchiha, along with a few other civilian parents waiting for their children. The looks of surprise amused Naruto and almost shocked him because he didn't think anyone knew who he was. He continued walking as the adults made way for him to leave. Naruto started making his way to the Hokage's tower. It was time that he live on his own, and to do that he would have to clear it with his former father. Thinking about it, Naruto knew that Minato and Kushina may feel a bit of remorse, but it was too late. Though it had only been about 2 years since he was living here, so much had changed. He wasn't a kid anymore. Sarah had made sure that he knew that before he attained his title. His title was also something that had been on his mind lately. He knew that he was one of the most skilled swordsmen in the elemental nations already. All he needed now was to gain experience and let his name grow. That was the only reason he was in Konoha. Brought out of his thoughts by his realization that he had made it to the tower, he entered and proceeded to walk up the stairs to the Hokage's office. As he neared the door, he realized that the secretary was not there and he started to hear yelling. Coming up to the open office door, he was greeted with the sight of Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze yelling at her husband. I want my son on my team Minato. I haven't seen Naruto in over a year. I've missed so much and I'll be damned if I miss any more of his life, so put him on my team, Kushina yelled. I must disagree Mrs. Namikaze, said Naruto, alerting the two to his presence as he walked into the office. Kushina's eyes immediately watered upon seeing the boy she had neglected for so long. Shaking out of her stupor, she started to run to hug her son but was held back by Minato, who simply shook his head, confusing and infuriating her greatly until she realized how Naruto had addressed her. Mrs. Namikaze. When Kushina stopped struggling, Minato quickly smiled. Naruto, how was the exam? He asked, making way to his chair to sit down as Naruto did the same. Disappointing, Lord Hokage, most notably in the form of Menma. But I'm sure that Tsunade will make sure he is perfectly well, Naruto said coldly. Both Minato and Kushina frowned. They both, along with help from Jiraiya and Tsunade, had trained both Menma and Narumi to be formidable opponents for most Chunin, yet Naruto spoke as if Menma was simply a waste of time. Their concerns were interrupted when Naruto began to speak again. As for your suggestion Mrs. Namikaze, since I will be labeled as dead last for lack of attendance, I must be placed on the same team as the Rookie and Kunwachi of the Year. And though Menma and Narumi are at the top of the board in terms of combat, I doubt that their test grades match, isn't that right Lord Hokage? Naruto asked with a smirk. Minato sighed, knowing that his son was right. That's correct. I don't have the final results for everyone yet, but it looks like the Rookie of the Year will be Sasuke Uchiha and the Kunwachi of the Year will be Hinata Hyuga, Minato said tiredly. He and Kushina had stressed to their children that book smarts were important, but it never took, unfortunately. Well Naruto, what can I do for you right now? He asked, trying to figure out why his son was here. Lord Hokage, I was wondering if you could tell me of any apartments for sale, he asked, causing both Minato and Kushina's eyes to widen. What are you talking about Naruto? You live at the compound with us. You can't leave, you're too young to live on your own, Kushina yelled. Naruto simply rolled his eyes and pointed to his armband. This means that I am considered an adult, and it is also highly irregular for a non-clan member to live at a clan compound, he said, confusing Minato and Kushina. What do you mean? You're still part of our clan with or without that armband, said Kushina. Naruto only shook his head. No, in accordance to Konoha clan law, once the title of heir is removed from said heir, they are hereby removed from that clan, replied Naruto without emotion. At this point, Kushina started crying and Minato felt ashamed. "Are you sure about this, Naruto?" Minato asked. "Very sure, Lord Hokage," he replied coldly. After staring at his son for a few moments, Minato sighed and started writing down the address for an apartment in Konoha's red light district and handed it to Naruto, who took it and left with a simple bow. As Kushina continued to cry about losing her baby boy, he just prayed that Naruto would someday accept them back. Time skip 8 hours. Naruto was currently walking through the red light district of Konoha after just making an agreement to live in a nearby apartment with the landlord. As Naruto continued to explore the area, he sensed a follower. Smiling to himself, he started walking out of the way of the buildings and businesses until he finally came to a forest. After a few minutes of walking through the forest, he stopped. Without turning around, he spoke. "You should know that following me is not the smartest decision," he said, then turned towards the area of the intruder. He was surprised when his follower revealed himself to be Itachi Uchiha. "And why is that?" Itachi asked with his arms crossed. Naruto chuckled. "You are the Uchiha prodigy, Itachi Uchiha, correct?" he asked, getting no answer. "Would you do me the honor of sparring with me so that I may see for myself how much of a prodigy you are?" he asked seriously. Itachi's eyes narrowed. "It would be much too dangerous for you to fight me," he replied, trying to figure the boy out. Naruto smiled. "Oh, trust me, Itachi, it won't be too dangerous for me," he replied, looking up. "Beautiful night, isn't it? A full moon. I need to understand where I stand in this village, Itachi, so I must insist," Naruto said before reaching out his hand. To Itachi's surprise, a flash of light appeared in Naruto's hand, and when it died, in its place was a large sword that seemed like it would be impossible for Naruto to even lift with both arms, much less hold it in one hand. Itachi looked at Naruto one more time before making his decision. Looking in Naruto's eyes, he saw confidence and power. So out of curiosity, he reached back and unsheathed his Anbu Tanto and activated his Sharingan, which brought a smile to Naruto's face. "I recommend that you go all out," yelled Naruto before vanishing. Itachi looked around before hearing a voice behind him. "Or you might just die," said the voice, causing Itachi to quickly turn around and bring up his Tanto just in time to block a downward strike from Naruto's massive sword. The single strike caused Itachi's arms to go numb from the force behind the blow. Just as fast as the blow came, it disappeared, and before Itachi could react, Naruto was behind him and used his sword's blunt side to hit Itachi's back, sending him flying about 6 feet away before he hit the ground. Itachi quickly jumped up and barely dodged a swipe from Naruto's sword. Gaining proper footing, Itachi looked for an opening to attack but was finding none as Naruto started to advance his attacks onto Itachi, forcing him on the defensive. It was taking every bit of skill Itachi had to block each slash from Naruto. Eventually, Naruto slowed his attacks and Itachi took full advantage by attacking an opening that was left by Naruto on his left side, only for Naruto to quickly vanish and appear behind him. Once again, Naruto hit Itachi in the back with the blunt side of his sword, knocking the Uchiha face down on the ground. As Itachi lay there, Naruto jumped a few feet back and looked at him. "I must say, Itachi, you are the second prodigy that I have faced today, and for the second time I am disappointed. Though I suppose Kenjutsu isn't really your expertise, is it?" Naruto taunted with his sword held on his shoulder. On the ground, Itachi was thinking. "He's moving too fast for my Sharingan to even catch a glimpse of him. I've been holding back, but I know he is as well. That sword of his is strong and he knows how to use it. I may have to win this with ninjutsu," he thought before slowly getting up. Once Itachi rose, he started going through hand signs as Naruto watched with a bored but intrigued look on his face. "Fire release. Great fireball technique," Itachi yelled as he blew out a large fireball towards Naruto. Naruto shook his head and began to spin his sword in his hand before re-gripping the sword and cutting through the jutsu. Once he did so, he looked up expecting to see Itachi but was met with nothing but the forest. As he was about to start looking for Itachi, a blade rested itself on the neck of Naruto. "I win," spoke Itachi before the sound of clapping reached his ears. Turning around, Itachi was visibly surprised to see Naruto walk into the clearing clapping. Once Itachi turned, the Naruto he had a blade too poofed into smoke. Realizing what had happened, Itachi simply sheathed his sword and looked at Naruto. Well, Itachi, maybe it is too soon to write you off just yet, though you only did use one technique. Nonetheless, I'm satisfied. Good night, Itachi, Naruto said before turning around and leaving the forest. Itachi stayed where he was contemplating the short spar the two had. That boy has a bright future ahead of him. Maybe a good rival for Sasuke as well. Itachi quickly exited his thoughts as he quickly made his way to the Hokage's office. The Junin senseis were picking their teams tonight at the tower, and he knew exactly who he wanted for his team after his quick spar, which would leave him undoubtedly sore for the next few days. His mother is the one who had talked Itachi into becoming a Junin sensei, saying that it would be best for Sasuke to learn from Itachi. That, and she wanted him out of Anbu. He was hesitant to the idea, but now after fighting Naruto, he knew this would be an exciting experience. So with that in mind, he reached the tower ready to fight for the mysterious boy to be trained under him. Naruto sat in the back of the class with his eyes closed. Currently he was going over his fight with Itachi the night before. Neither he nor Itachi were going all out, but he doubted he could take Itachi on anyway, considering the fact that Itachi only used one jutsu. Naruto smiled. One thing did upset Naruto though, and that was the fact that Itachi tried to use a sword to beat him. Now Itachi couldn't possibly know about his prowess with a blade, but it still felt somewhat insulted and irked him slightly. He was drawn from his thoughts by the sound of all of the former academy students entering the classroom, excited about team placement and not shutting up about how awesome it would be when they finally got to show off their moves to strong enemies. It annoyed Naruto immensely that these children had such a naive mindset about the life of a ninja. Once again, Naruto thanked Kami that he had been taught by Sarah, otherwise he may have ended up just like these idiots spouting up nonsense about their strength and how great they would be. Once again, Naruto was drawn from his thoughts as he felt the eyes of someone staring at him. Lazily looking around, he found the culprit to be Sasuke Uchiha, little brother of Itachi Uchiha. Sasuke Pav. Sasuke stared at Naruto and was brought back to what happened last night when his brother arrived home. Flashback. Sasuke was in the backyard practicing his fireball jutsu when he sensed someone watching him. Turning around, he was met with the form of his older brother Itachi. He smiled at seeing his brother, but Itachi continued to stare, looking lost in his thoughts. "Hey Itachi, you okay?" he asked. Itachi shook his head and walked up to Sasuke before looking down at him. After a minute of staring, Itachi spoke. "Sasuke, there is something I need to tell you in regards to the boy named Naruto. You have seen him in a taijutsu match against Menma Namikaze, but that is it. Am I correct?" Itachi asked. Sasuke simply nodded and Itachi sighed. Once again Itachi gained a thoughtful look on his face before speaking. "Naruto is strong. Stronger than you, stronger than your class, and stronger than the class previous. He is a legend in the making, so I want you to examine him, learn from him, emulate him. It will only make you stronger in the long run, for I believe that soon, the boy may be stronger than all of us." Itachi finished before walking back inside and leaving Sasuke to think about his words. Flashback end. Sasuke just looked at the boy that his brother had told him about until Naruto met his stare, causing him to turn away. Not long after, Iruka entered to announce the teams. Iruka gave a short speech congratulating the new genin before announcing the first team. Normal Pav. Team 7 will be Menma Uzumaki Namikaze, Narumi Uzumaki Namikaze, and Sakura Haruno under Kushina Uzumaki and Kakashi Hitaki. Team 8 will be Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inazaka, and Shino Aburame under Kurenai Yuhi. Team 9 is still in circulation, so on to Team 10. Team 10 will be Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi under Asuma Sarutobi. And finally Team 11 will be Sasuke Uchiha, Yakumo Kurama, and Naruto under Itachi Uchiha. Now everyone wait here for your senseis, and once again, I am very proud of all of you," he finished. After Iruka left, Naruto looked around the classroom for his other teammate but couldn't find her, mostly because he didn't know the names of the majority of the class. Before he could think on it anymore, a dark figure entered the classroom. Itachi Uchiha had arrived. "Team 11 meet at training ground 11 inches, he said before shining away in a flock of crows. Naruto watched as Sasuke rose and noticed a frail-looking girl in the opposite corner of the room stand as well. Sasuke approached him and the girl followed. Sasuke stopped in front of him. "I know where training ground 11 is, so you two can follow me," he said, observing Naruto and ignoring Yakumo. Naruto looked at Yakumo and nodded. "Lead the way and we will follow," he said, and the three took off. Training Ground 11. Itachi sat on a wooden stump thinking about his team. He knew everything about his brother in terms of skill and personality. Yakumo was shy and had a weak body but was said to be a genjutsu prodigy with the ability to make her illusions real, and then there was Naruto. Even though he had the least information on him, Itachi could already tell from their spar that he was the strongest genin on the team. He was interrupted from his thoughts as the three genin that had been on his mind arrived in front of him. Itachi looked blankly at the group before speaking. "Sit down and introduce yourselves," Itachi said, motioning to the ground. The three said nothing before Itachi pointed at Sasuke to speak and received a nod. "I am Sasuke Uchiha. I like training and my family. I dislike fangirls and the weak. My goal is to bring honor to the Uchiha clan," he said before looking back at Itachi, who nodded and pointed to Yakumo without a word. Yakumo rubbed her arm before speaking quietly. "My name is Yakumo Kurama and I like my family and genjutsu. I dislike perverts and rapists," she said in a tone that seemed very out of character for the seemingly shy girl. "My goal is to become the best genjutsu master ever," she finished with determination in her eyes, which proved to Itachi that she would be willing to work hard to achieve her goal. Once again Itachi nodded. Itachi then turned to the final team member who was resting his head on his chin looking right at him. "Naruto, your turn," Itachi said, wanting as much information on his genin as possible. Naruto contemplated what to say for a moment before speaking. "My name is Naruto. I like my sword, training, and the moon. I dislike the arrogant and those who can't back up what they say. My goal is unimportant," Naruto finished, surprising Itachi that the boy had chosen to reveal that much considering the fact that Naruto didn't seem like the sharing type. Sasuke looked over Naruto before responding to his answer. "I don't see a sword with you," he pointed out. Naruto looked at him but never replied. After thinking about each of his team's responses, he stood up to speak. "Most of the genin teams are taking a test to determine whether or not they deserve to be genin based on teamwork. The fact that you came to the training ground as one unit is enough to assure me that the three of you will work together. But I do want to test your combat abilities, so all three of you are to attack me so that I may understand each of your abilities," he finished before crossing his arms, looking bored but keeping an eye on Naruto, who also had his arms crossed. Sasuke took offense to the fact that his brother seemed to be underestimating him so blatantly, so he rushed forward and launched a kick at Itachi's head, which was blocked by Itachi simply raising his arm. The effortless block just served to infuriate Sasuke further as he got up, launching shuriken at Itachi and preparing his fireball jutsu. Itachi sighed and shook his head. His little brother, ever the one to fall victim to his emotions. He took out a kunai and simply swiped through the shuriken. By the time he had blocked them, Sasuke's fireball was launched and coming after him. He lazily replaced himself with a log and appeared in front of Sasuke, who was lightly panting. With one punch, he sent Sasuke flying into the forest. Itachi looked back to Naruto's position only to find no one there. Once again, Itachi sighed but figured his team would come after him again soon. Sasuke was rubbing his cheek where he had been punched, surrounded by Naruto and Yakumo. Naruto took the opportunity of Sasuke being silent to speak. "Listen, none of us are a match for Itachi, but together we may be a slight challenge. Here's what we are going to do. I will go out and challenge Itachi, and while we fight, Yakumo will cast a genjutsu." Naruto was interrupted before he could say more by Yakumo of all people. Naruto, I'm nowhere near Itachi's level of genjutsu. Anything I try and cast would be dispelled by him before it take effect," she said. Naruto shook his head. Normally that would be true, but he won't be paying enough attention to know when the genjutsu starts, and by the time it does, it will be too late. Make a genjutsu that will keep him still. When he dispels the genjutsu, I will be there to hold him in place. That is when you Sasuke will come from the forest to force him to surrender by putting a kunai to his neck. Itachi gives up, we win, and it's over. Got it? He asked, getting confident nods from his teammates. Naruto smirked. Maybe this team could actually work. Itachi was standing and waiting for his next opponent when he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he was met with the sight of Naruto walking towards him. Itachi immediately prepared himself, knowing that this was perhaps the only genin that could require most of his attention. "I see you came alone. Are you looking to finish what was started last time? Itachi said with a smirk. Naruto rolled his neck with a pop sound as a result. Without a word, Naruto dashed forward with the speed of at least high Chunin, aiming to punch Itachi in the face. Itachi jumped back, but Naruto unexpectedly flipped after missing and brought his foot down on Itachi's shoulder, knocking him back. As Itachi was knocked back, he could already feel the bruise forming on his shoulder. Itachi knew that Naruto was skilled with taijutsu, so he started to think around it. He could fight Naruto with his sword, but something told him that his chances of death were higher than not. He could fight him with taijutsu, but there would be some explaining to do if he showed up in the Hokage's office later with multiple bruises, even if he wasn't trying. So that left him with ninjutsu. He had only seen Naruto use the shadow clone jutsu, so it might be best to make this into a ninjutsu battle. Itachi quickly did the signs and quietly said, "Great Fireball Jutsu," launching a very large fireball at his student. Naruto clenched his teeth but knew this was the risk of trying to make Itachi resort to using ninjutsu only. Naruto stretched his arm, and as it did the night before, his massive sword appeared in his hand. Deciding to show Itachi something he hadn't shown him previously, he pushed chakra into and around his sword. Raising his arm, he swiped down powerful enough to push his blade into the ground towards the incoming fireball. A chakra wave formed from his sword and flew, splitting the fireball. But the wave continued and was now nearing Itachi. Itachi was able to jump away at the last second but watched the result of the wave. Once the wave hit the trees, it was as if hundreds of sword slashes were attacking the trees at once. Before Itachi could overcome his shock, he felt something grabbing him. Looking down, he was surprised to see many thick vines overcoming him and holding him. Just as it was about to completely overcome him, he sensed that it was a genjutsu and dispelled it. Once he did, he was met with the sight of his brother holding a kunai to his throat, daring him to move. Itachi smirked and simply said, "I surrender." Sasuke removed his kunai, Yakumo came out of her hiding space, and Naruto joined the team from his spot. Itachi spent the next 2 minutes examining his team and analyzing their strategy. It was a very sound plan with even better execution. He could tell already that this team would go far. Though his brother had been a bit disappointing, he was still involved in the outcome and would only get better. Yakumo's timing and strength of her genjutsu were practically flawless, and Naruto's ability to make Itachi lose focus of his teammates was very inspiring. Yes, this team would go far. We're done for today, go home and rest. We meet tomorrow at 6 in the morning and don't be late, he said with a small smile, leaving to go to the Hokage's office. Had he turned around, he would have seen the sight of his 3 genin wide-eyed and open-mouthed. After Itachi had left, the 3 simultaneously shouted, "6." After the shock of training time wore off, Sasuke and Naruto started to go their separate ways before being stopped by a quiet voice saying, "Wait." The 2 turned around to see Yakumo rubbing her arm. I was hoping that we could all go out and get something to eat and get to know each other since we are on a team together," she said expectantly and hoping they said yes. Sasuke shook his head. "I have to go train and get stronger. Maybe you should as well instead of worrying about socializing," he said before leaving. Yakumo quickly developed a disappointed and hurt look before looking at Naruto. Naruto was quiet for a moment before nodding. "That sounds good. I noticed a restaurant on the way here. Yakiniku Q I believe it was called," he responded. Yakumo smiled and nodded. The 2 took off to Yakiniku Q while their ever-polite teammate returned home to train. All Junin senseis were gathered in the Hokage's office waiting to give their reports. Minato entered the office and sat at his desk, followed by the current elders of the village, Jiraiya and Tsunade. "Okay, so the team tests were today. Please give me the results everyone," he said as each Junin stepped forward to give their report on their team. Team 1 fail, Team 2 fail, Team 3 fail, Team 4 fail, Team 5 fail, Team 6 fail. Kakashi stepped forward. Team 7 pass. Menma and Narumi performed well except for that they were easily goaded into a fight and too often let their emotions cloud their decision-making. The Haruno girl is a bit of a problem as well, but I believe that we can train her and make her useful, finished Kakashi with Kushina nodding behind him. Minato sighed. He knew that his children would pass, but they did let their emotions override their judgment, a trait they undoubtedly got from their mother. The Sannin behind him chuckled, as did a few Junin. Minato nodded and motioned to Kurenai. Kurenai stepped forward to report. Team 8 pass. Hinata has potential in Gentle Fist but too hesitant, whereas Kiba is too impulsive, but Shino is very intellectual and was able to get his teammates to follow his plan of draining me of my chakra. Then Kiba and Hinata alternated in their clan styles against me, she said. Asuma took a puff of his cigarette before being elbowed in the gut by Kurenai. Team 10 pass. Ino commanded Shikamaru and Choji to get me in place for her to use her mind transfer jutsu to beat me. He finished and then stepped back. Minato didn't know what to expect when Itachi stepped forward. He hoped the team passed for the sake of his son, as did Kushina, who was nervously looking at Itachi. The Junin in the room, however, were sure that the team assigned to Itachi Uchiha had failed, despite his brother being on the team. Team 11 pass, he said, causing whispers to start among the other Junin. Minato quickly got tired of the whispers and said loudly, "Quiet," before motioning to Itachi to continue. Itachi took a deep breath. "What I say may not be easy to understand, but please let me finish before questions are asked," he said, getting a nod in response from Minato. Team 11 has greater potential than that of the Sannin, he said, which immediately gathered shouts from the other Junin, narrowed eyes from the Sannin, and wide-eyed responses from Minato and Kushina. This time Minato had to shout, "Quiet," to get everyone to settle down. "Please continue, Itachi," he said. Itachi simply nodded. "Before I explain what happened for me to come to this realization, I will tell you of my students. Sasuke is strong for a genin but needs training and perhaps a new mindset. Yakumo is a genjutsu prodigy with potential surpassing that of my own in the field," he said, getting wide-eyed shocked responses from every Junin in the room, but none as shocked as Kurenai. Minato was shocked at how much praise Itachi was giving before realizing he had not heard about his own son yet. "And Naruto?" he asked, getting the attention of everyone in the room, especially the Sannin, who wanted to know how strong the boy was. The boy who they were supposed to have a relationship with but instead never even acknowledged him. Itachi sighed for what seemed like the 100th time today. "Naruto is the strongest genin and perhaps the strongest chunin in Konoha," he said, getting the most shocked reactions that he had gotten all day. "And that is just during the day. At night, I'm unsure exactly how strong he is, but his power is immense, perhaps as strong as I am with my Sharingan activated," he finished, expecting the questions to flood like water breaking a dam. Minato spoke first. "How do you know he is strong at night, Itachi?" he asked curiously. Itachi looked at the Hokage, ignoring everyone who were still trying to fathom what he was saying. "After the graduation exam, I tailed him. It was relatively late and he sensed me. We had a short conversation before he challenged me and summoned a giant sword almost as tall as him and just as wide as his body. Before he attacked, he made a suspicious comment about how beautiful the moon looked and then attacked. We fought and it ended with me finding out that I was fighting a clone the whole time. But more surprising, he was toying with me while using his sword. I launched a fireball at him and he simply cut through it. He is very strong during the day, especially with that sword of his, but at night, he's almost unstoppable," Itachi reminisced. Kushina spoke next. "You keep saying he has a sword, but I've never seen him with it. Also, how good is he? Is there any room for improvement?" she asked, hoping for another way to bond with her son as she was a sword master herself. Itachi chuckled, which soon turned into a full-blown laugh, leaving a few wondering if he had gone off the deep end. "I don't know how, but he just holds his arm out and the sword appears into existence. And as for needing improvement, I think he's perfectly fine in the area of swordsmanship." Minato then decided to wrap everything up. "How did your team pass, Itachi?" he asked, getting back to the point. Itachi nodded. "Naruto kept me focused on him and when I used my giant fireball, but he summoned his sword and cut it in half, but a chakra wave from the sword kept going, barely missing me. The chakra wave hit a tree and when it hit, it was like hundreds of strikes at once. While I was focused on Naruto's attack, Yakumo was able to cast a genjutsu in which vines attempted to smother me. When I dispelled it, Sasuke had his kunai to my throat, so I surrendered. They work well together and are powerful in their own right," he finished. Minato took a deep breath before thanking everyone and letting them leave. Kushina, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Tsunade stayed behind. "What do you all think?" Minato asked. Everyone was silent before Tsunade spoke. "We fucked up. Yakiniku Q." Naruto and Yakumo sat next to each other enjoying their meal. Yakumo then turned to Naruto. So you left the village and learned how to use that sword I saw? Yakumo asked for the third time since arriving at the restaurant. Naruto simply nodded. What was it like outside of Konoha? She asked. Naruto swallowed the food in his mouth before responding. Well, I mostly stayed in the forest but it was nice. Naruto then asked a question that had been slightly bugging him. I'm curious why you didn't invite any of your friends. I'm not the most fun person to hang out with. Yakumo's smile turned into a sad frown and she looked down. Naruto gave her time before she responded. I don't have any friends. When I was younger, there was something wrong with me. My personality had split to form a creature called Ito. I'm fine now but everyone still walks on eggshells around me, even my own family, she said, and tears began to fall. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. A hand grabbed and held hers. She looked up to see Naruto looking at her with genuine worry and care. It made her heart flutter. After staring into Yakumo's eyes, Naruto spoke. You don't have to worry about that anymore. The past is the past, and if no one wants to hang out with you now, then fuck 'em. If people call you weak, destroy them. If no one believes in you, make them believe in you. And always remember, if you feel alone, you've always got me, he said with a smile. Yakumo teared up and hugged him tight. She felt at peace when she felt him hug back. It had been a month since Team 11 was formed. The team had grown stronger together both physically and emotionally. The three shared a strong bond with one another. It had taken some time and effort, but Naruto and Yakumo were eventually able to crack Sasuke's shell enough that he would now willingly hang out with the two. Another bond that had increased exponentially was that of Naruto and Yakumo. Ever since their time together after training, the two hung out more often, getting to know each other to the point of becoming best friends. They understood each other because of similar feelings of loneliness. Secretly over the past month, the two had developed feelings for one another but kept quiet about it. The three as a whole had the best teamwork and best record for missions completed despite being D-ranked. It is after finishing the D-ranked mission of finding Tora the demon cat that we find Team 11 in the Hokage's office. Hokage's office. Minato was already tired from his earlier paperwork, which had now increased due to the actions of Team 11. Your mission was to capture Tora and return it to the daimyo's wife. Care to explain what went wrong? Minato asked, waiting for an explanation. We returned the cat. I don't see what the big deal is, stated Naruto with both his teammates nodding in agreement. Itachi put his face in his hands out of embarrassment. Minato's eye twitched violently. The big deal is that when returned, Tora had half of his tail cut off and cauterized by a fire jutsu. The cat is also now suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder due to a genjutsu placed on it. I would say all in all that is a big deal, he said. I am tempted to assign you 20 more D-rank missions without pay, he said, getting gloomy looks from the team. Naruto was more annoyed than gloomy. He hated this. He wanted to fight, he needed a challenge, something he most certainly was not getting from these ridiculous D-rank missions. The only thing more annoying to him than the D-ranks was the fact that the Hokage and his wife had taken to trying to get him to return home. Even the Sannin had attempted to get on his good side, offering training and summoning contracts, acting like the neglect that he had suffered from them didn't exist. It made him sick. Yakumo had suggested that he give Minato and Kushina a chance, and Naruto had promised that he would think about it. Lately he had been thinking about reconciling with his parents. He knew it would take time, but he was slowly becoming more open to the idea as long as they stopped annoying him with questions like, "How are you?" and "Are you eating your vegetables?" Naruto decided to push his thoughts to the side as he saw Sasuke ranting about something, so he decided to tune in. I think it's time that we get something worth our time. We are the strongest genin team you've got, and you know that, so give us something that will be a challenge, Sasuke finished before earning a punch to the head from Itachi. Itachi had witnessed his brother's growth in the past month and was genuinely proud. His little brother had grown not only as a fighter but as a person as well. But even after his transformation, Sasuke still needed to be reminded of his place from time to time. Minato contemplated Sasuke's words and looked at Itachi. Itachi, do you believe that your team is ready for a C-rank mission? Minato asked, gaining an immediate response of a nod. Very well, I have an escort mission for a bridge builder to Wave Country if that satisfies. I'm confident that you would be able to handle any mishaps, Itachi, he said, but became confused as Itachi shook his head. My apologies Lord Hokage, but I will not be able to attend this mission due to clan business. Even though I will be absent, my team is more than skilled enough to take this mission on alone, Itachi stated, gaining blushes from his genin. After a few minutes of thought, he nodded slowly. He had heard very good things about Team 11, also known as the Second Coming of the Sannin, shorter name still pending. Itachi openly bragged about his team when asked about them, which was very out of character for the normally quiet, well-reserved Junin. Fine, but if there are any problems, you're to send for help immediately. Do you understand Team 11? He asked and received nods in response. Good. Anbu, bring Tazuna in. Moments later, an obviously drunk old man entered the room, stumbling a bit. So this is what I get for all the money I'm paying. A couple of brats still in their diapers? He asked, causing Team 11 to unconsciously leak a small amount of killer intent. Before it could go any further, Minato intervened. Tazuna, I assure you that this genin team will get you to wave without a hitch, he said. Tazuna just grunted. Itachi turned to his team. I want each of you to pack for a C-rank mission and meet at the gates in an hour. I have to go sober the client up. All three genin nodded and shunshined out of the office. Village gates 1 hour later. The three genin stood together talking about the mission. I'm pretty nervous, to be honest. Our first C rank and we don't even have Itachi-sensei to help us, Yakumo said, looking down. Naruto looked at his friend and took her hand in his, causing her to look up. We've got each other. As long as we stick together we'll be fine, so don't worry Yakumo, said Naruto in a gentle tone. Yakumo smiled appreciatively and tightened her grip. Sasuke rolled his eyes at the sight. Get a room you two, he said, causing Naruto and Yakumo to blush. Anyway, like Naruto said, we'll be fine. Especially with an Uchiha on the team, he said proudly and full of determination. But you haven't even unlocked your Sharingan yet Sasuke, Yakumo said, causing Sasuke to immediately develop a rain cloud over his head and start muttering statements about dishonoring the Uchiha clan. Both Naruto and Yakumo's sweat dropped at the sight before going over to comfort Sasuke and try to help him regain his former confidence. This is the site that Itachi and Tazuna arrived to. Itachi sighed and Tazuna looked at Itachi before asking, is it too late to get a different team? Which never got a reply. When the team realized that the client and their sensei had arrived, they immediately recovered and stood straight waiting for instructions. Itachi shook his head. Okay team, you know the mission, now go out there and make me proud, he said with a small smile. The team smiled as well and nodded. And with that, Team 11 and Tazuna the bridge builder took off to wave. While Naruto and Sasuke were keeping a lookout for any bandits, Yakumo was looking around and taking in the scenery of the forest outside of Konoha. So this is what it's like outside of Konoha. I like it, Yakumo said before turning her attention to Tazuna, who seemed very nervous. So Tazuna, what's wave like? Yakumo asked, trying to calm him down. It seemed to work as Tazuna thought for a moment before speaking. Wave used to be beautiful. The people were happy and everyone took care of one another. It was perfect. That is until Gato showed up. Gato is the head of the Gato shipping company, so he quickly commanded a lot of authority over us because we need the seas to survive. But Gato came in and started bleeding us dry. We were so scared until Kaiza the village hero stood up to Gato. Gato had him executed in front of everyone to make an example of what happened when someone defied him. After that, our village lost hope. But this bridge I build will make it so that we aren't forced to rely on Gato and bring hope to our people, he said with determination that impressed Team 11. After Tazuna had finished, the four continued walking until they came across a puddle in the middle of the road. Naruto and Sasuke shook their heads. We're never gonna hear the end of this from Yakumo, are we? Asked Sasuke. Naruto shook his head no. One thing Yakumo hated was when people misused genjutsu. After beating the person to a pulp, she tended to go on long rants about the skill and beauty of genjutsu and how much she hated those who tried to tarnish it. Naruto and Sasuke stopped in their tracks and walked back towards Tazuna to cover him. Whatever the threat was, they doubted that it would be too much to handle. After only a month of training under Itachi and with Naruto and Sasuke, her body was no longer frail and weak. She now had the most physically fit body of any of the girl in her genin class, which really came as no surprise except maybe Narumi, who had trained seriously her whole life. Yakumo was also very flexible and incorporated that into her taijutsu. As Yakumo and Tazuna stopped to see what was wrong, Yakumo saw the puddle in the road. Her eye immediately began twitching and a vision of the Shinigami appeared behind her. Clenching her fist, she walked forward until chains from the puddle tried to wrap around her, but she jumped straight up, avoiding them. After the chains fell, two figures jumped out of the puddle, both wearing hidden mist headbands with a scratch through the symbol. Naruto folded his arms. The demon brothers Gozu and Maizu? Interesting, Naruto said before narrowing his eyes. Sasuke looked at him. You know them? He asked, and Naruto shrugged. On the way back to Konoha, I read the bingo book. These guys are C-rank Chunin level opponents, said Naruto. You think she can handle both of them? Sasuke asked, getting a blank stare in return. Looking back to the battle, Sasuke muttered, "You're right, stupid question." Tazuna in the meantime was internally panicking and praying that he was not about to get a few kids killed. Currently Yakumo was simply dodging the attacks from the demon brothers with such fluidity and grace that it infuriated them. It infuriated them because it was a sign that this little girl was toying with them, and from the look on her face, she was bored. Their opinions were correct. Yakumo was bored, so she decided to end it. After dodging another strike from Gozu, she pushed off her back foot while grabbing her kunai and dashed towards him, stabbing just above the heart and flipping into the air. As she came down, she brought her foot down on Maizu's shoulder, knocking him down. Naruto and Sasuke, seeing that the battle was over, approached Maizu. Naruto stepped forward. Let's make this quick and simple, shall we? Your brother is going to die if he doesn't get treatment, and you are going to die after my friend here. He pointed to Yakumo. Puts you in a genjutsu that makes you wish for death. Or you could tell us why you attacked us, we let you go and hopefully never see you again. Choose now, Naruto ordered in a dark tone. It was a no-brainer for Maizu, who couldn't feel his arm because of Yakumo's kick. He quickly spilled everything he knew and then was allowed to leave. The three genin turned to Tazuna. So it looks like Gato wants you dead. Well, let's keep moving, he said, and the team started walking forward. Tazuna was shocked. He was sure that the three would abandon the mission because he had lied, but here they were continuing in spite of it. Hurry up, Tazuna, shouted Naruto, shaking Tazuna out of his stupor as he ran to catch up. It had been an hour since the four had gotten off the boat to get them closer to Wave, and the team was bored. Luckily they were almost there, according to Tazuna. So bored. When are we gonna get some action? Yelled Sasuke before the team heard a buzzing sound. Immediately Team 11 and Tazuna, thanks to Yakumo being there, dropped to the ground before a giant sword could decapitate them and flew into a tree. Getting up, Naruto turned to Sasuke. You just had to jinx it, didn't you? Naruto said, and Sasuke had the decency to blush in embarrassment. Naruto shook his head and looked at the sword, which now had a man crouching on it. The man wore wrappings around his lower face and had a hidden mist headband with a scratch down the middle like the demon brothers. Zabuza Momochi, demon of the hidden mist, a ranked missing nin of Mizugakure, wanted for attempting to murder the current Mizukage. What a treat, Naruto said, focusing mainly on the sword Zabuza was crouched on. If he played his cards right, he might be able to get a sword fight worth his time. Hand over the bridge builder and I may let you live, Zabuza said plainly, but keeping his eye on the blonde, who had a growing smile on his face, which was a bit concerning. Naruto started chuckling, which soon turned into a very loud, insane laugh. After catching his breath, Naruto turned to his teammates and simply said, "He's mine," before holding out his arm. To Zabuza and Tazuna's shock, a giant sword appeared in his hand. Well, Zabuza, it's been some time since I've gotten a challenge in a duel. Hopefully, you're worth my time. Fingers crossed, he said with a smile and resting his sword on his shoulder. Zabuza jumped off his sword and pulled it free before taking his stance. The way this boy talked both confused and pissed him off. He was confused by the amount of confidence he was exerting, but pissed off that this child thought he could stand up to him with a sword. Don't say I never gave you a choice, said Zabuza before dashing at him, poised to strike, but his attack was cut off by Naruto's giant sword, which blocked his own with ease. Chuckling, Naruto pushed back before twisting the sword position in his hand to bring it down on Zabuza. The slash was blocked, but it left Zabuza's arm tingling. The next thing he knew, Naruto was behind him, facing away from him. Before he could question what he was doing, he felt a great amount of pain in his abdominal area. Looking down, he was shocked to see a wound from Naruto's sword. Turning around, he was met with the sight of Naruto smiling. "How are you so fast with a blade like?" Zabuza asked while Naruto's smile just grew larger in size. "It's a secret," he said before disappearing and reappearing in front of him. Before Zabuza could react, Naruto punched him in the face, sending him flying. While flying, Naruto disappeared again and sent him upwards with a kick that landed close to his spinal cord. Once again Zabuza flew into the air and landed roughly on the ground shortly after. Zabuza groaned but got up. "I thought you said this was a sword battle. I expected you to be using only your sword," he said. Naruto blinked a couple of times before responding. "Are you a genin? You certainly have the mindset of one if you would agree to such terms. And if we were just using swords, you would be dead by now. Use jutsu if you must. Show me your full power, it matters not. The end result will still be your death," Naruto said, gaining a dangerous look in his eye. Zabuza quickly retreated to the middle of the lake behind them and Naruto slowly followed. Naruto watched, sword in hand, as Zabuza shouted, "Hiding in the mist jutsu," and a wave of mist began to rise, making him invisible to Naruto, or so he thought. Naruto just yawned and raised his sword and started spinning it in his hand. As it spun faster, the mist collected and dispersed while Zabuza stood there surprised at the boy's skill with his sword. "Well, I'll admit, boy, that you are good, but let's see you shake off this one." "Water Dragon Jutsu," Zabuza shouted. A dragon formed of water immediately rose from the lake and attacked Naruto. Naruto once again shook his head and raised his sword to the sky. When he swung his sword down, a chakra wave was created, and it flew through the water dragon and barely missed Zabuza. "It's time to end this. I'm sorry for what is about to happen," said a voice from behind Zabuza. When he turned around, Naruto was there to make a slash at his chest then disappear. The next slash came along his right arm, then his left shoulder, then the back of both of his thighs, and finally across his back. Zabuza was still alive, but he had never felt this much pain before. Before he could have another thought, Naruto appeared in front of him with his sword drawn back behind him, and with an upward slash, Zabuza was launched 20 feet in the air. Naruto forced chakra to his legs and jumped above Zabuza with his sword once again raised to the sky. Naruto then shouted words, "Hammer slash," the boy shouted before bringing his sword down on top of his chest and pushing the two quickly to the ground with a collision so great that the area of the lake where the two landed pushed the water away, leaving them on a dry surface. Naruto looked down and recognized that Zabuza was still breathing, but barely. He had perhaps 2 minutes to live. Naruto grabbed his body and leapt to shore before the water filled the area the two were previously in. As Naruto set the demon of the mist down, he had to move his head as a girl with black hair came flying out of the forest with an enraged look on her face and throwing senbon at him. "You son of a bitch! How could you?" the girl shouted with tears running down her face. "Haku," said the weak voice of Zabuza as loudly as he could. Haku immediately stopped her attack and rushed over to Zabuza's side. "Master, I'm sorry. This is my fault, I failed you," she said, leaking tears. Zabuza looked at her and shook his head slightly. "No Haku, I failed you. I made you feel like you were just a tool to me when really you were so much more. Listen, because I don't have long. I want you to go with this boy and his team. You'll be safe as long as you stay with them. I love you, daughter," he finished, and like that, the demon of the mist was no more. "I love you too, father," Haku silently said, still holding on to Zabuza's dead body. Naruto observed the scene with mixed feelings. On one hand, he wasn't sure that he should take this Haku with him as she could pose a problem, but on the other hand, looking at them had reminded him of his last moments with Sarah. He sighed. She didn't seem like a threat to him, so he supposed that he could abide by Zabuza's last wishes from one swordsman to another. Naruto walked forward. "We can give him a water burial here and then you may join us if you wish," Naruto said to the still devastated Haku. She simply nodded in response. Naruto walked back to where his teammates and Tazuna were. Sasuke and Yakumo came up to him. "Are you alright, Naruto?" asked Yakumo with concern, which made Naruto give a small smile. "Yes, Yakumo, I'm alright. Also, we are going to be having a new member tag along," Naruto said, getting confused looks from his team. "What happened over there, and also how did you jump that high?" asked Sasuke. Naruto looked at the trees. Zabuza's final moments were what happened over there. As for the jump, it's a secret, he said with a smile of amusement. Sasuke was irritated at the fact that Naruto wouldn't tell him how to perform something that looked so cool but just shrugged. After the water burial and everyone getting to know each other even though Haku was still hurting immensely, the group of Naruto, Yakumo, Sasuke, Haku, and Tazuna took off. Only 20 minutes of walking and the group had finally arrived at the village. It was a pitiful sight. The mood was gloomy, the people looked hopeless, there were people on the streets begging for food. Tazuna shook his head. This is the result of Gato, he simply said before walking to a house sitting on a pier. The group followed Tazuna and entered the house with him. Tsunami, Inari, I'm home, Tazuna shouted, and seconds later a black-haired woman came running and hugged Tazuna. I thought you had died, Dad, she said with a few tears leaking. Tazuna hugged back. I would have if not for these remarkable ninja, he said. Naruto and Haku stood indifferent. Yakumo was rubbing her arm and blushing from embarrassment, and Sasuke was standing tall and proud. Naruto and Yakumo both didn't want to break Sasuke down like they had at the village gates by reminding him that he hadn't really done anything along the way here. Tsunami looked at the ninja and walked up to them. Thank you for protecting my father. He and my son are all I have left and the entirety of Wave Country is relying on him, Tsunami said. Naruto gave a small smile. It's no problem and we're happy to help. Is there anywhere we can rest? We're pretty worn out, he asked, which got questioning looks from Sasuke and Yakumo since they had never seen him tired. Tsunami pointed upstairs and told the group that there were 2 rooms that they could use. After thanking her for the hospitality, the group made their way upstairs. Once they arrived upstairs, Naruto turned to Haku, who had been silent. I know that you probably hate me for taking away your father, but if you do anything to threaten the lives of my team, I will kill you, he said coldly while his team said nothing. Haku nodded. My father told me to go with you. I will attempt to help you and your team as much as possible, she said. Naruto's mood then did a complete 180 as he gave a large smile and said, Welcome to the team, Haku. Naruto then looked at Sasuke and Yakumo, telling them without words to follow him into his and Sasuke's room. When they entered, Naruto almost fell face first on the ground if not for Sasuke catching him. Naruto, what's going on with you? Asked Sasuke while Yakumo was by Naruto's side holding his hand. After being lowered to the ground, he looked up at his teammates. Nothing's wrong, I'm just really exhausted. That hammer/slash attack you saw me use takes up a lot of energy. I'm just lucky I didn't tear anything, Naruto said. Sasuke looked confused again. What do you mean tear anything? He asked. Naruto sighed. All of my stronger attacks that I use are kind of like double-edged swords. They are powerful, but the stronger they are, the larger the possibility of a serious injury. It can go from simple exhaustion to death. Not unlike jutsu, he said, getting understanding looks from his team. Well, we need to be up early tomorrow, so Yakumo, you go get some sleep, he said. Yakumo stared at him worriedly for a minute before nodding and leaving. Sasuke and Naruto quickly went to bed as well. All of Team 11 fell asleep wondering what challenges would come next. Naruto was sitting on top of Tazuna's house staring at the moon shining through the night sky while everyone else slept. He had come up to the roof because Sasuke's snoring was really bad. He had things to think about, and the aftereffect of his hammer/slash was worse than he had let on. He told his team that he was just exhausted, but in reality, the muscles for both of his arms were shredded. The pain was nearly unbearable, but Naruto had been able to pass it off as exhaustion and was now letting the moon do its job. The light of the moon was slowly healing his body instead of simply increasing his power like usual. While this process was going on, Naruto's thoughts drifted to Minato and Kushina. Ever since he had returned, the two had not stopped trying to get him to return to them. Each time they asked, Naruto declined, but it hurt deep down every time. Truthfully, he wanted a relationship with not only his parents but his brother and sister as well. It was what he always wanted. But every time he thought about forgiving Minato and Kushina and maybe coming home, memories of the pain and loneliness he felt throughout his childhood resurfaced. Perhaps one day he would be able to have a relationship with his mother and father, but that wouldn't be until he was able to finally put the past behind him. Menma and Narumi were a different story completely. While their parents had taken to trying everything in their power to gain forgiveness from Naruto, Menma and Narumi had made it clear that they did not want to be in his life nor him in theirs. They felt that they were justified in the ridicule they applied and arrogance they showed, that they were truly better than everyone else and the weaker ones should be treated as scum and peasants. Both refused to even acknowledge the fact that Menma had been completely outclassed by Naruto, chalking it up to dumb luck mixed with pity. If they were not his brother and sister, Naruto would probably find the situation funny to an extent. But they were his brother and sister, and deep down he still cared for them as such even though they did not feel the same. Lastly, his mind drifted to Sarah, his teacher, his role model, his friend. He wondered if she would be proud of him. He did just kill a former member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist, but Sarah was hard to impress, so her response probably would have been, "Why did it take you so long to beat him?" And then she would up his training tenfold. Naruto chuckled sadly. He missed her a lot. But one day he would see her again, and until then, he would do his best to make her proud. And with that last thought, Naruto let himself fall asleep. Naruto was woken by the sound of everyone in the house moving around in the house. Sitting up, Naruto clenched both of his fists a few times and stretched his arms. He was still sore but was physically fine. Jumping off the roof landing in front of the door, he righted himself before entering. When he entered, he noticed Tsunami cleaning dishes and his team and Haku eating breakfast at the dinner table. Looking towards the open door, Tsunami smiled when she saw it was Naruto. "Come in, Naruto. I just made breakfast and left you a plate at the table," she said before pointing at a spot by Yakumo. Naruto smiled in return and took his seat at the table before digging in. Naruto was halfway through his breakfast when Tsunami left the area. Once Tsunami left, Sasuke turned to Haku. "Haku, could you go outside? Our team has something to discuss privately," he said calmly, causing Naruto's eyebrow to rise, wondering what this was about. Haku nodded and quickly made her way out of the house while Sasuke and Yakumo stared at Naruto. "Naruto, you've been hiding things. We realize that you deserve your privacy, but we are your teammates and both Sasuke and I feel that we have earned the right to know about it," Yakumo said, never taking her eyes off Naruto. Sasuke continued where Yakumo left off. "Listen, all we want to know is what you can do and how you can do it. You don't have to tell us any details that you don't want to, but it will definitely help us become stronger as a unit. It might even help me get my Sharingan," Sasuke said, muttering the last part. Naruto was a little surprised at the way that his team went about it, but he honestly had no problem with revealing his abilities to those he trusted. And Yakumo, Itachi, and even Sasuke were the people he trusted most in this world. "Okay," Naruto said, nodding his head. He could barely contain his laughter at the stunned look that Yakumo and Sasuke were giving him right now. After shaking of his surprise, Sasuke asked, "So you will just tell us right here right now? Just like that?" His brow twitching slightly. Naruto simply nodded. "Yep, I have actually been waiting for one of you two to ask," he said, causing both Sasuke and Yakumo to fall face first onto the floor. After getting up, both Yakumo and Sasuke started thinking of questions to ask Naruto. Sasuke was the first to voice his question. "Okay, where did you get that sword you always use and who taught you how to use it?" Sasuke asked, and noticed that Naruto's amused demeanor quickly turned into a slightly depressed one. After a few moments of staring at the window, Naruto answered. "The sword is well a little complicated. It all happened when I left Konoha. You see, there is a line of legendary swordsmen that I am a part of. I'm the 11th swordsman of them, and when I was truly accepted as one, the sword appeared in my hand," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Sasuke looked at Naruto as if he was crazy but knew that he wasn't one to lie. "And the one who taught you?" Sasuke asked. Naruto just shook his head and replied, "She's gone now. That's all you need to know." While Sasuke contemplated on the answers he had been given, Yakumo looked at the boy who she considered her best friend. It hurt a little that there were some things that he hadn't told her, but it had only been a month and she was confident he would have told her everything eventually. Shaking her head, she asked her question. "My turn. How strong would you say you are?" she asked. Naruto looked up in thought while Yakumo and Sasuke were leaning in, expecting him to say something like Sandan of Cage level. Naruto looked at the two and replied, "I dunno," causing Yakumo and Sasuke to once again fall face first onto the floor. When the two got up, Sasuke, with his eyebrow violently twitching, yelled out, "What do you mean you don't know?" Naruto shrugged. "I don't know. I'm pretty strong in the day, but at night it's a completely different story," he said, eliciting confused looks from his teammates. What do you mean by that? Why would the time of day change how you fight? Yakumo asked. Naruto smirked. Well, when the moon is shining, my strength triples, he said, watching Yakumo and Sasuke's jaws drop. While Sasuke and Yakumo were still recovering from shock, Tazuna came down the stairs. Everybody ready to build a bridge? Tazuna asked, getting a nod from Naruto but no reaction from the other two. Naruto sat on the edge of the unfinished bridge, keeping an eye on Haku and the production of the bridge, while Sasuke and Yakumo were sparring in taijutsu. With the help of Itachi, Sasuke was practicing the Uchiha taijutsu style but still couldn't use it to its full effect because he didn't have his Sharingan yet, while Yakumo used a style that Itachi helped her create. The style involved a lot of dodging, taking advantage of her flexibility and allowing the opponent to overexert themselves before landing quick rapid strikes to open areas. It wasn't perfect, but it fit her combat set, especially since she was supposed to be a genjutsu specialist, which weren't expected to be well versed in terms on taijutsu. As a whole, Team 11 was well above taijutsu. Naruto's attention was then shifted to a few of the workers having a heated argument with Tazuna, so he decided to listen in. What do you mean you quit? Don't you see how much we need this bridge? What this bridge means? Tazuna asked with a furious expression on his face. The workers were looking towards the ground with apparent shame on their faces. We're sorry, Tazuna, we really are, but we've got families. If we get on Gato's radar, then the same thing that happened to Kaiza is gonna happen to them. We're just thinking of our families, and honestly you should too, Tazuna, the lead worker finished, barely able to look Tazuna in the eye. By this point, Sasuke and Yakumo had come back from sparring and were now listening in. Before they could add their opinions to the discussion, their team leader did. Cowards, Naruto said coldly, hopping off the edge of the bridge and walking to where the conversation was taking place. You have the opportunity to save this country. To prove that you won't bow down to that pathetic bug Gato. Tazuna continues every day building this bridge, knowing full well the dangers of crossing this tyrant, but in every revolution, there is sacrifice. If you truly believe that the cause is not worth sacrifice, then leave, but if you look upon your once beautiful country and feel sadness and the urge to change it, then stay, for I swear here and now that this bridge will be finished with or without you. So I ask, will you be the one who gave in to Gato's demands, or will you be a hero and save this dying nation? He finished, causing the workers and Tazuna even to look at him with newfound determination and resolve. The workers went back to work, filled with a fire that would only be extinguished through death. Tazuna looked at the workers and then nodded towards Naruto. No more words needed to be said. It had been a week since Naruto's speech, and at the moment, bridge production was on hold for a day. Tazuna saw fit to give his men a day off because they were so far ahead of schedule, due in no small part to Naruto. Naruto, Sasuke, Yakumo, and Haku were sitting in the living room of Tazuna's house hanging out. Over the past week, Haku had proven to be not only trustworthy but easy to talk to as well. Team 11 and Haku now got along as if they were never enemies, instead childhood friends. The team had learned that she was the holder of the Hyutin bloodline, which Naruto and Yakumo thought was cool. After finding out about Haku's bloodline, Naruto thought it would be fun to mess with Sasuke by turning to him and asking him, "Why hasn't your bloodline activated?" Which resulted in Sasuke sulking in a corner and growing even more insecure about his lack of Sharingan. Despite this, Sasuke and Haku actually got along really well. Since Naruto and Yakumo usually stuck together, Sasuke was left with Haku and the two had gotten to know each other really well. The two considered each other good friends already. Haku loved hearing stories about Konoha and Sasuke's family. Their friendship got to a point that Sasuke eventually asked Haku if she wanted to stay at the Uchiha compound when they returned to Konoha until she could find her own place, to which Haku accepted. Throughout entire conversation, both Sasuke and Haku were blushing like crazy. Everything was relaxed until, while in the middle of Yakumo's explanation of a new genjutsu idea, Naruto stood up with a serious look. Looking at his team and Haku, he said, "Trouble on the bridge," before rushing out the front door. Yakumo quickly followed while Sasuke turned to Haku, knowing who it was on the bridge. "Haku, gather the town, it ends today," he said, gaining a nod from Haku before quickly following his teammates. Naruto, Yakumo, and Sasuke quickly made it to the bridge to find a short man in a suit and sunglasses, a tall man with long white hair tied into a ponytail and holding a katana at his side, and a mob of at least 200 thugs lined up behind the two. The group focused on the short man as he stepped forward to speak. "So you are the ones who have kept that idiot builder alive. I must say that you've been a very big inconvenience for me, but if you throw enough money at a problem, it tends to go away," he said with an evil smirk. After Gato was finished, the man with the katana stepped forward flaring his chakra. As he unsheathed his sword, Naruto started walking forward with a smile. "You two take care of those thugs, leave this guy to me," Naruto said confidently. Yakumo looked ready to protest, but Sasuke put his hand on her shoulder and shook his head. "He'll be fine, for now we have a bridge to protect," gaining a nod from Yakumo, and with that the battle for the bridge had begun. Naruto looked across the bridge at his opponent with a smile. "Why don't we take this to somewhere less crowded?" suggested Naruto, to which the white-haired man simply nodded too. Making their way away from everyone else, the two entered a clearing in a nearby forest. Upon arriving, the two faced each other, Naruto summoning his sword and his opponent unsheathing his katana. "I sure hope that you know how to use that thing. I haven't had a challenge in forever," Naruto said with a grin. The white-haired man chuckled at Naruto's statement, causing the genin to frown. He then spoke to the boy facing him. "Yes, not many can compare to the grace and power in which Sarah wielded her blade," he said, visibly shocking Naruto. "She certainly was one of our strongest members, so I'm excited to see how her apprentice measures up," he said with a grin before flaring his chakra. The genin started shaking and asked, "How do you know that?" before getting his nerve back. The man smirked. "Well, any self-respecting swordsman would be able to detect the power coming from that blade. As a matter of fact, your sword is even stronger than Sarah's, and her sword was the strongest I had ever come across. As for how I know her, that's a secret. Now let's get this over with," he said, causing Naruto to fall into his battle stance. Both swordsmen ran at each other, with each strike between swords causing sparks to fly. Naruto was swinging his sword trying to find an opening, but his opponent's form was perfect. Naruto, having enough of close combat, jumped backwards and swung his sword, releasing a chakra wave that flew towards the unnamed katana wielder, who just smirked. When the wave arrived, he simply rose his katana and held his ground against all of the strikes compounded in the wave. "Look kid, I've actually got an appointment to keep, so what do you say we just end it right now? One last strike?" he asked, angering Naruto, who felt underestimated. The boy just nodded and held onto his sword tighter while making a final dash towards his unknown opponent while he did the same. The two ended up 10 feet away from each other, backs to one another. Naruto smiled before feeling a sharp pain and dropping his sword, which vanished before it hit the ground. Looking down, he saw a large gash across his chest. Falling to his knees, he had one thought: "I lost?" His opponent stood up and walked over to stand in front of Naruto. "Well, I must say, you are more than I expected. You even managed to nick my shoulder, but all for naught, right?" he said before shoving his katana into Naruto an inch above his heart and out his back, causing Naruto's eyes to widen and yell out in pain. Just as quickly as the man had stabbed Naruto, he removed his sword and resheathed it before turning away and leaving, only to stop after walking a couple of feet. "By the way kid, the name's Iliel," he said before vanishing, leaving Naruto on the ground holding his hand over his recent wound. Naruto was holding the area where he had been stabbed, trying to ignore the gash on his chest when he heard the sounds of battle. He needed to help his team. So with great effort, the genin rose and went as fast as he could in his injured state to the bridge. Sasuke and Yakumo. Yakumo and Sasuke had started out strong, but 200 grown men, some of which were using weapons such as clubs, knives, and daggers, were starting to wear on the two genin. So far, Yakumo had killed 15 thugs, as she had started with making distractions in the beginning but had knocked out around 30 men. Sasuke had killed 45 people and knocked out 30 as well. Yakumo had started running low on chakra after using 3 powerful genjutsu and was now exclusively using taijutsu. Yakumo was adept in taijutsu, but when she was surrounded by a crowd, despite moving as quickly as possible, she was unable to avoid the constant amount of blows but continued to fight on until a member of the crowd hit her in the back of the head with a club, knocking her out. The men around her would have killed her if not for Sasuke making his appearance, using the great fireball jutsu to incinerate 10 of the men around Yakumo without harming her in the process. Before Sasuke could refocus on his group, he was hit in the back and forced to his knees. When he looked up, he was met with the disgusting face of just another thug, except this one was holding a sword to Sasuke's throat. "I gotta say, kid, you gave us a good fight, but your time's up," the man said, raising his arm to decapitate Sasuke. The genin closed his eyes and waited for the strike, but it never came. Opening his eyes, he was met with the sight of a wall that seemed to be made of ice blocking the man's blade. The man looked at the wall in confusion when a fist came from the corner of his vision and punched him backwards quicker than he could defend himself. As he landed on the ground, he found 3 senbon stuck in his arm. The other men, shaken from their slight shock at such a quick turn of events, were able to locate the attacker, who looked to be just a girl in a kimono. Before anyone could do anything, a layer of mist started to cover the bridge. When the thugs started trying to regroup, body after body began to fall to the ground, each with a senbon in their neck. Sasuke wondered what was going on, since he couldn't see from the mist and behind the ice wall protecting him, when a familiar face emerged from the mist. "Haku," said Sasuke with a slight smile, gaining one in return from the girl who approached the genin, kneeling down to meet his eyes. "Sasuke, I'm glad I wasn't too late," she said with a slight blush. "No, I think Yakumo over there is gonna need some help soon, but I think the two of us should be able to take on the rest of those guys," he said, gaining a nod from Haku. Sasuke stood up with a little assistance from Haku. When the two were standing, Sasuke faced Haku and looked at her one more time. A girl who had started out as his enemy was now someone he trusted on the same level as his teammates, someone he was about to free a country with. He saw determination in her eyes and lost focus for a moment, looking into her eyes. It was in this moment that both ninja failed to feel a new presence enter the area. When Sasuke finally felt the presence, he was too late. The thug that Haku had saved him from, shielding him from his sword with an ice wall, now had that same sword, pushed right through Haku's back and out her stomach. As soon as the thug released the sword from his grip, he received a kunai right through his eye and into his brain. As Haku fell with a look of shock on her face, Sasuke fell with her. Immediately, tears had started to fall from Sasuke's eyes and were also building in Haku's. Sasuke looked at her wound frantically, trying to think of a way out of this. When Haku saw this, she smiled and placed her hand on Sasuke's, gaining his immediate attention. "Haku, just hold on, I'll get us out of this. Just let me think. Sasuke was stopped from saying anything else by Haku, who gently put her finger on his lips, silencing him. "Thank you, Sasuke. Thank you for making me feel wanted. Thank you for making me feel important," she said before weakly bringing his face down so that their lips met. Sasuke was surprised at the action but fell into it. He was reminded of the situation when Haku's body suddenly went limp in his arms. "Haku? Haku? Come on, Haku, please don't leave. Wake up, Haku. Wake up," he screamed before yelling out at the sky. He felt a burning sensation in his eyes, but he disregarded that as he laid Haku's body gently onto the ground and rose up. Turning to the remaining men, he clenched his fist and released all the killer intent he could. The group of thugs shivered when they looked into the boy's eyes, which were now red with 2 tomos in each eye. Sasuke took out his last kunai and made a decision. These men would die by his hand even if he had to go down with them. That was their punishment for taking someone who was precious to him away. Sasuke ran at the crowd with a battle cry ready for blood. Naruto. Naruto had finally made it to the bridge and was met with the sight of nearly 100 dead men. Looking quickly for his team, he found Yakumo, who had a small pool of blood coming from what looked to be a head injury and covered in various other cuts and bruises but still breathing. His eyes then landed on Haku, who had chest wound and was not breathing, which hurt Naruto's heart immensely. After limping further along the bridge, he found an unconscious Sasuke lying next to Gato, who had a kunai driven into his throat. As he made his way to Yakumo, he noticed movement from the far end of the bridge. Sasuke, Yakumo, and Haku had taken out 100 of the thugs, and after seeing the viciousness of Sasuke had fled. But upon realizing that the boy that had horrified the group was out of commission, the remaining 100 regrouped and returned to the bridge. The genin was tired despite how quick his battle with Iliel was. The man had known where to strike, so Naruto was in an immense amount of pain every time he moved, and for some reason, Naruto could feel his chakra burning. He was so low on chakra that his vision was becoming blurry and he found it hard to stand. Knowing that this might be the end for him, He decided that it would not be the end for his team even if it killed him. So with a new source of strength and determination, he rose his arm and summoned his sword. Raising it to the sky, the swordsman shouted, "Death Splicer," and swung his blade down, sending his chakra forward in a visible wave that went speeding towards the crowd before falling to the ground. For a moment, nothing happened. The men started feeling good about themselves until the front line of men's bodies erupted with blood from hundreds of slashes. The same thing happened for the second line, third line, and so on. A few of the men tried to run, but it was useless. The wave of sword slashes found them. In one attack, 100 men were dead, the bodies shredded beyond recognition. Naruto watched the effect of his attack from his position on the ground. When it was over, he looked over at the one most precious to him. Yakumo. With all of his remaining strength in his arms, the boy pulled himself to Yakumo before rolling onto his back. Luckily Yakumo was only unconscious and the bleeding had stopped. Her breathing was fine, which was something Naruto was eternally grateful for. Taking her hand and looking at her beautiful face, he moved his head to look at the sky. With his most precious person's hand in his, he smiled, accepting his fate. As he faded, the last thing he saw was a flock of crows flying in the sky. Naruto awoke panting. Looking around, he recognized that he was in a Konoha hospital room. As he continued to survey his surroundings, the door to his room opened. "Oh good, you're awake," said a woman with short black hair. "You gave us quite a scare," she said with a smile. Naruto narrowed his eyes in confusion. Who are you exactly?" he asked, which gained a frown from the woman. "It's me, Shizune. Come on, I've been by your house plenty of times. You know, Aunt Shizune," she said with a smile, hoping Naruto remembered her. Naruto nodded his head in recognition. "Yes, you are the woman who always stuck with Tsunade. I believe that this is the first time that we have ever met. Everyone always had a tendency to fawn over Menma and Narumi while completely ignoring me," he said with a hint of bitterness, causing Shizune to gain a sad look on her face. Truthfully, Shizune had realized that she was wrong to ignore the boy and had been kicking herself ever since she heard about him becoming a genin. It had actually spread pretty quickly throughout the village about the strength of Naruto, causing many people to try and get on his good side. Shizune really wanted to have a good relationship with him but knew it would be a tough road ahead. Without a word, Shizune checked over Naruto's chart and nodded. "Just buzz me if you need anything, okay Naruto?" she said, getting only a quick nod in return. Shizune sighed and left the room. A tough road indeed. Naruto looked out the window at the village. How did I get back to Konoha, was the question on his mind before seeing his chart on the bedside table. Reaching and grabbing it despite being incredibly sore, he scanned over his injuries. Besides his sword wounds, the only real injury he had was extreme chakra depletion to the point that he almost died. Pathetic. I get in one small fight and end up in the hospital because of 2 sword strikes and too much chakra. Pathetic, he thought before looking at his hands and noticed that they were covered in blood. He tried wiping the blood off on his blanket but it wouldn't come off. Slightly annoyed, he buzzed Shizune to come to his room. Not even 20 seconds after buzzing, Shizune entered the room with a smile. "Is there something wrong, Naruto?" she asked, and Naruto showed her his palms and gaining a confused look from Shizune. "Could I get a wet towel to wipe the blood off my hands, please?" he asked, causing Shizune to frown and gain a concerned look on her face. "Naruto, there isn't any blood on your hands," she said. Yeah, there is. See? It's all over my palms, and arms, and he stopped before his eyes widened. "Kai," he shouted, trying to get out of this genjutsu. When it didn't work, he began to hyperventilate. Visions of bloody, unrecognizable bodies flashed through his eyes. He only found mercy from the visions when Shizune injected him with a heavy sedative. Ordering a separate nurse to stay and watch Naruto, she left for the Hokage's office. Hokage's office. Itachi was standing in front of the Hokage and Jiraiya giving his report of what he had seen involving Team 11's mission. He had already given the report of his own personal report and was now telling the story of Wave. "I had finished my mission early and decided to check on my team's progress by heading to Wave. When I arrived, the entire village was on edge and practically hiding. I asked around about my team and eventually an old man was able to give me information on their location. The bridge. So I headed there and upon arriving, I noticed Sasuke, Naruto, and Yakumo were each unconscious. I created 3 shadow clones to carry my team to the village for some help while I looked for clues on what happened, he said before pausing, getting a curious look from Minato and Jiraiya. What did you see, Itachi? Asked Minato. Itachi shook his head. I apologize, Lord Hokage. I saw well over 100 bodies littering the bridge. Upon examination with assistance of my Sharingan, cause of death was half by kunai, half by sword. When I returned to the village, I learned from one of my shadow clones that my team was settled in the home of the old man who gave me their location. I found my team and healed their immediate wounds as best I could. After 2 days, Sasuke and Yakumo woke up. Naruto did not wake. I carried him on the 3rd day along with shadow clones carrying Sasuke and Yakumo, who still needed recovery but in a real hospital. I also became aware on the way here that Sasuke has awakened his Sharingan with 2 tomos in each eye, Itachi finished. Minato could feel a migraine coming on. Were the people that were dead ninja? Minato asked. Itachi simply shook his head. Jiraiya snorted. Your team, who you say are gonna be better than the Sannin, barely took out a couple of thugs who don't even use chakra. The Toad Sage mocked, causing Itachi to tighten his fist and unconsciously activate his Sharingan. I stand by what I said. My team will be better than the Sannin. Better ninja and better people. They won't become a lunatic who enjoys experimenting on people, a drunk who doesn't care about her family's legacy, or a pathetic old man who can only spend his days peeping on women because he's useless for anything other than writing his poorly written smut. I'll warn you, Jiraiya, do not ever insult my team in my presence or I'll let you feel the true wrath of the Sharingan, he said with an angry look in his eyes. Enough, Minato shouted, trying to stop this before anything physical could occur. Jiraiya, please leave, I still need to finish up with Itachi. Jiraiya left through the window but not before leveling a fierce glare at Itachi. Minato sighed, rubbing his head, and looked up when his office door opened and Shizune entered. Before he could say anything, Shizune spoke. Lord Hokage, Naruto has woken up but just had a panic attack, she said quickly. Minato's eyes widened upon hearing the condition of his firstborn and quickly rose from his desk and shunshined to the hospital. Naruto's hospital room. It took 3 hours for Naruto to wake from his sedative-induced nap and was immediately met with the sight of his Hokage. Minato, realizing that his son was awake, met his eyes. When I returned to Konoha after killing 1,000 Iwa shinobi, I was treated as a hero. I was given the moniker of the Yellow Flash of Konoha. I was treated with respect, but I never felt like one. True, I did my duty to my village, but not a day goes by that I don't think about the day that I ended the lives of those men and women. After making my way through all of the villagers and fellow ninja that wanted to buy me a drink, I made it to my apartment and saw blood on my hands. No matter how much I washed, the blood wouldn't come off. If your mother had not been there for me, I have no doubt that I would have killed myself. I just want you to know that you're not alone, and if you ever need someone to talk about this to, I'm here. I may have been a horrible father, so bad that you may not see me as anything more than your Hokage, but I'm sorry for everything. You will always be my son to me, and I'll always love you, Naruto, he said with a tear falling from his eye. As Minato began to stand up to leave, he was stopped by Naruto, who grabbed him in a hug and started sobbing. Minato's eyes widened before hugging back. In between the sobs, Naruto spoke. It hurt so bad. The loneliness, always being ignored. I only wanted to make you proud, he said, letting the tears fall. Minato tightened his hold. I know, son, and I'm so sorry that I didn't realize it until now. I'm so sorry, he responded. After a couple of minutes, the two released from their hug and wiped their tears. Naruto looked in his father's eyes, looking for any sign of deception before speaking. I forgive you, Dad, he said, causing new tears to come from the two. Naruto was sitting at a table in Yakiniku-Q, the restaurant that had quickly become a regular for Team 11, more specifically Naruto and Yakumo. Sitting in his chair, Naruto couldn't stop drumming his fingers on the table and was lightly sweating out of nervousness. Just a few days ago, after being released from the hospital, he had asked Yakumo if she wanted to hang out at the usual spot, to which she readily agreed. His intention was to reveal his feelings to Yakumo at some time during their meal. So here he was, trying to find anything to distract him from what was coming up in hopes of calming himself. He quickly thought back to his stay in the hospital after his and his father's reconciliation. Flashback. Naruto's hospital room. Naruto was lying in bed staring at the ceiling. It had been a day since the emotional conversation with his dad, and ever since then, he had felt as if a great weight had been lifted off his shoulders. In all honesty, he was bored and hoping that something would happen to gain his interest. His wish was granted as a red-headed missile practically slammed the hospital room door open, and before Naruto could react, was crushing him in a hug. When Naruto was finally able to process the situation, he realized that his mother was the one holding him and sobbing while she was doing it. Looking at perhaps the most powerful woman in Konoha and seeing her break down like this, his heart tugged and he felt a need to comfort her. As Kushina continued to cry, unable to stop the tears from pouring after seeing her son in the hospital, she felt a pair of arms surround and hold her. Looking up, she was met with her eldest son looking at her with genuine care at her. Something that she really didn't deserve. Ever since Naruto had first left, her mistakes and misgivings as a mother became visible to her. She had neglected and ignored her firstborn son and focused on Menma and Narumi solely because of them having the Kyuubi's chakra. The results had been that she had pushed Naruto out of the family and created self-entitled, pretentious, arrogant brats. She still loved Menma and Narumi. As their mother she would never stop, but she hated what they were becoming. After a few more moments of sobbing, Kushina looked up at her son's face and smiled. "I heard that you were hurt on your mission, so I headed right over. That idiot Minato, when I get a hold of him," she said, getting red in the face until Naruto put a hand on her shoulder to calm her down. "It's okay, Mom, we knew the risks when we took the mission," he said, trying to appease his mother. "Yeah, I know, but," Kushina stopped mid-sentence and her eyes widened. Had he really just called her Mom? Or was it her imagination? "Naruto, did you just call me Mom?" Kushina asked shakily. Naruto smiled and nodded, which resulted in another crushing hug and a waterfall of tears from the red-hot habanero. Naruto would never admit it, but there were a few tears that fell from his eyes as well. Flashback end. After beginning the healing process with his mother, they had talked until she had to leave. A lot of barriers had been broken down and a lot of demons put to rest. It felt good to have his parents back in his life. Thinking about everything that happened since arriving back in Konoha, he realized that his parents had become two of his precious people. Precious people. That word brought a frown to his face. He had been surrounded by his parents and after being released from the hospital with Yakumo and Itachi, but he hadn't seen Sasuke since their return. When he had asked Itachi about him, the Uchiha just replied, "He's dealing with some things," and left it at that. Before Naruto could think any further on the subject, he noticed his beautiful teammate enter the restaurant. Sasuke's room. Sasuke sat on his bed thinking about the one person who had been on his mind since the Battle of the Bridge, as the villagers of Wave called it. Haku. He didn't know how to feel about her death. Sasuke was heartbroken that she had died, and because of him no less. It both infuriated him and made him want to stab himself in the heart with a kunai. Before the battle, Sasuke had been planning to let Haku stay with him and his family, but that had been taken away by pathetic mercenaries who were only able to get the better of him due to attacking in such a mass amount. It wasn't until after the battle that Sasuke realized how much he truly cared for Haku. The multitude of dead men that day was proof of that. As Sasuke continued to think back on the mission, his thoughts drifted to Naruto. There had been times when Sasuke wanted to beat Naruto within an inch of his life. He was their leader, their strongest member, and he abandoned them. He may have taken action in Wave if not for two reasons. 1. Naruto would kick his ass even as injured as Naruto was. 2. He knew Naruto always did what was best for the team. Sasuke's thoughts were interrupted by the opening of his door. He was surprised to see that the visitor was not his mother for once, but his brother. Itachi entered the room and sat next to his brother in silence for a few minutes. The Uchiha prodigy wasn't great at conversation, but he could see that his brother was in pain and needed someone to be there for him. "Sasuke, I know that you're in pain, but the only way that you will recover is if you open up. You have been in here since you got out of the hospital and it's starting to worry Mother. It's starting to worry me as well, brother. So let me in and tell me what's wrong," Itachi pleaded. Sasuke took a moment before answering. "During our mission, we picked up a girl named Haku. She was the girl that was lying by me on the bridge when you arrived," he said, gaining a look of recognition from his brother. "During the bridge construction, me and her became close. I even offered to let her stay here since we were bringing her back and she wouldn't have anywhere to stay. She died because of me. She died protecting me. She died before I could even tell her how I felt about her. If I had been stronger or more alert, then she would still be alive. But I wasn't, and now she's dead. I keep thinking of how I could have protected her, and one consistent factor keeps coming up. If Naruto hadn't abandoned Yakumo and we would have slaughtered those insects and Haku would still be alive. The genin finished, clenching his fists so hard that blood began to run from his hands. Looking at his little brother and seeing the look in his eyes of pure hatred, Itachi knew that he had to let Sasuke know why Naruto wasn't there. Sasuke, after Naruto woke up in the hospital, I spoke to him about the mission. The reason he left the bridge was because he knew that the swordsman that was part of Gato's army was powerful. He made the decision to get him away from the battle, trying to keep you and Yakumo safe. When he fought the swordsman, he lost badly. This revelation made Sasuke's eyes go wide. I have never seen a swordsman with as much skill or potential as Naruto, and he has yet to reveal his full power. That being said, for someone to beat him in a duel, much less do it without breaking a sweat, worries even me. If not for him taking the swordsman away from the bridge and that very swordsman showing mercy, you would all be dead, Itachi finished. Throughout the story, Sasuke's eyes had gotten wider and wider. Beating Naruto in a duel was unheard of. He saw how effortlessly Naruto had killed Zabuza, an ranked missing ninja, firsthand. For someone to beat him in the way that Itachi was explaining seemed impossible. Learning this new information caused all of Sasuke's feelings of anger and desire for vengeance to turn into that of gratitude for saving his life and guilt for blaming his friend. Upon seeing the look of anger on Sasuke's face disappear, Itachi smiled and stood up from the bed. As he started to leave, he stopped at the door. I almost forgot to give you this, Itachi said, walking over to Sasuke and handing him a paper. Only sign up if you want to, he said before finally leaving. After Itachi left, Sasuke looked down at the paper. Chunin exams, huh? Yakiniku Q. Naruto and Yakumo were laughing at a story about Naruto's first time using a sword. As the laughter died down, Naruto gained a somewhat serious look on his face and looked into Yakumo's eyes. Yakumo, the reason I asked you to meet me here today was because I had something important to say. Naruto was nervous and began to muster all the courage he could in order to confess to the girl of his dreams. In a bold act, Naruto took Yakumo's hand into his, causing Yakumo to develop a blush while Naruto's face was as red as a tomato. Yakumo, you are the first friend I ever had in Konoha. When I was made a genin, I honestly didn't care about the village or anyone in it. I would not have gone out of my way to help anyone here because no one had bothered to help me. But you changed that. You showed me that there are good people in this village. People who deserve my protection. Over the time that we've known each other, I've noticed that you make me a better person. You make me into someone who actually feels compassion towards others, someone who is no longer indifferent to the world. You have changed me for the better, and I want you to know how much you mean to me. I love you, Yakumo, Naruto finished. Yakumo had tears in her eyes. Never had she heard such a heartfelt speech aimed at her, and she could have never guessed that she meant that much to him. Naruto had been bold in taking her hand in his, so she decided to one-up him. Leaning forward before he could say anything else, she connected her lips to his. She didn't care that there were other people in the restaurant. As far as she was concerned, the only people on the entire planet were Naruto and her. After a fair amount of time lip-locked with her blonde teammate, she pulled back. Wow, she said, gaining a rapid nod in response from the red-faced boy. So I take it this means you feel the same way? Naruto asked, already knowing the answer. Before Yakumo could answer, Itachi shunshined in front of the two. Truthfully, Itachi had waited until the two were done with their intimacy to interrupt the new couple's date. Hello, I hope I'm not interrupting anything, Itachi said with an amused grin. Yakumo turned beet red and shook her head no, while Naruto simply muttered something about being a mood killer. I just came by to give you both these forms to compete in the upcoming Chunin exams. You don't have to compete, only if you feel comfortable. Itachi wasn't surprised when the two looked at him with determination and nodded. With his job complete, Itachi left the two to continue their date in peace. Hokage's office. Minato sat in his chair, turned and facing the village. Jiraiya had come by and was trying to get him to up Menma and Narumi's training, and the Hokage was trying to ignore him. Minato, listen to me. Jiraiya said loud enough to get him to turn around and gain his attention. The great Toad Sage has spoken. He foretold of two that have received legendary power who will either save the ninja world or be the catalyst for its destruction, he said with a serious look on his face. When I went back to see the great Toad Sage, he told me that the day of the prophecy being fulfilled was nearing. We need to make sure that the twins are prepared for their destiny. Triplets. Jiraiya gained a confused look before it turned to slight shock at how Minato was looking at him. I have 3 children, Jiraiya, not 2, Minato said, standing up. As for the prophecy, I nearly lost my family because of it. Nothing good has come from you revealing what the great Toad Sage declared. Menma and Narumi have become arrogant and constantly underestimate their opponents, believing that as long as they have the Kyuubi, they can defeat a cage-level fighter. Because of that damn prophecy, Kushina and I neglected our firstborn, which is a sin that both you and Tsunade have committed as well. I thank Kami that Naruto is at least somewhat normal, but I can tell that there is something dark behind the mask he wears. Something that he won't trust his own father with. No, Jiraiya, you may train Menma and Narumi as you please, but I am not going to focus solely on those two. I will bring Naruto back even if it means damning the entire elemental nations, he said with a look that Jiraiya had not seen since the day he earned the title, Yellow Flash of Konoha. Jiraiya sighed. His star pupil always was an idealistic one. Minato, this is the fate of the world that we are talking about. Are you willing to let it die? Are you willing to have that much blood on your hands? Because I'm not, and I will do whatever it takes to make sure that Menma and Narumi fulfill their destinies, he said with conviction. Minato just stared at his sensei for a moment before responding. Jiraiya, it took my family breaking for me to come to the most important decision in my life. If I got my family back, never again would I let go. I would watch the world burn as long as my family was safe. I will train each of my children, not solely Menma and Narumi. And if Naruto comes to any harm and I find out that it was because of your, for the good of mankind, mentality, I will make you suffer until you beg for death, Minato said, leaving Jiraiya with a jaw-dropped and completely shocked expression. After getting himself together and seeing that there was nothing left to say, Jiraiya left without a word. Namikaze Estate. Kushina sat in the living room watching Tsunade teach Narumi more medical jutsu while thinking about Naruto. She was hurt that Naruto didn't want to move back in with his family, but was overjoyed that she was on good enough terms for him to call her Mom. This sucks. Mom, can you get us a mission? I'm so bored. Get us at least a C-ranked mission, Menma said from a chair across from her, causing her, Tsunade, and Narumi to look at him. I heard that the failure got an A rank, Narumi said, immediately getting an angry response from Menma. What? Why should that worthless loser get anything? Why would Dad give him an A rank and not us? He practically screamed. Kushina looked at her son with a confused and furious glare. She knew that Menma and Naruto were not on good terms, but this was unbelievable. Menma, how dare you talk about your brother like that? He is not worthless, he is not a loser, he is your brother. Why can't you understand that? You're supposed to love him and vice versa, but it's like you don't want to, she said. Menma shook his head. I don't love him. I won't treat him as a brother. He is nothing but a weak blight on our family's name. He is just a disgrace, and the fact that we share the same blood is insulting enough as it is, he said before storming off to his room upstairs and leaving Kushina and Tsunade open-mouthed. Narumi hated when Menma was upset, and secretly, she felt the same way as he did. Team 11 Training Ground. Naruto sat on the ground letting the light of the moon shine over him. It had been a good day. After his and Yakumo's date, the two had found Sasuke and tracked down Itachi to tell him that they were entering the Chunin exams. Itachi's response was simply a smirk and a nod. After, the three hung out and trained at the training ground. Yakumo worked on new genjutsu ideas while Naruto and Sasuke trained by sparring each other in taijutsu. Sasuke didn't use ninjutsu in the spars for 2 reasons. The first was that he wanted a fair fight and Naruto didn't have a very big arsenal of ninjutsu. Second was that if he used ninjutsu, Naruto would use his sword, which was not something he wanted to face. He and Yakumo were happy that they were able to hang out with him. They had been worried about his mental state from the wave mission, but after today, he seemed fine. Before Naruto could go any deeper into thought, he felt a warm sensation on his bicep coming from his hidden summoning tattoo. His curiosity of the feeling of the tattoo was interrupted by the forming of mist and a large creature rising from the mist. When the mist cleared, Naruto squinted his eyes to get a better look at the creature before his face lit up in recognition. "Levios?" Naruto asked and received a nod from the serpent that now was coiled around itself in the field. "What are you doing here?" Naruto asked curiously. Levios lowered his head as much as he could to try and speak to Naruto on eye level. It didn't work. "Naruto, my father and I believe that something powerful is coming and coming soon. That being said, my father wants to teach you how to summon him," Levios said. Naruto gained a confused look on his face. "But I already know how to summon," he said, gaining a shake of the head from Levios. "No, you have never summoned my father before. To summon him in water is no small feat. It takes an enormous amount of power and if not done correctly, can have horrible effects on the body. Summoning any of the serpents on land takes significantly more chakra and puts a great strain on the body. We feel that you need to be able to summon us both easily on the water and be able to summon us on land, so that means that you will have to undergo a brief training period with us to prepare yourself," Levios finished. Naruto thought deeply on the subject before agreeing. As the summoner of the water serpents, he was all in on this. He needed the training if it led to him being able to summon the serpents at will. "Will I be leaving Konoha?" he asked. Levios nodded. "Yes, you will come with me to my homeland and when you have completed your training, you will return to Konoha," Levios explained. Naruto nodded before a question popped into his head. "What about my team and my parents? I'm pretty sure that leaving without a word will have some serious consequences," he said, causing Levios to simply nod. "I shall have a few of our messengers give information on your absence to your team leader and your Hokage," the serpent said before wrapping his tail around Naruto and vanishing. A Megacure no Sato. Nagato and Konan sat in the rain wondering when everything went so wrong. Scattered among them were several dead bodies, each wearing the same black cloak with red clouds. These corpses that now lie lifeless on the ground were each S-rank ninja, part of an organization known as the Akatsuki. The leader of this organization was Nagato Uzumaki, but now there was no one to lead. Out of the group, only he and Konan remained. "Nagato, we need to leave," Konan said worriedly to a blank-faced Nagato. The red-headed Rinnegan user simply shook his head at Konan's suggestion. "No, Konan, you need to leave. I am not healthy enough to travel. You know what must be done and unfortunately I will not be able to assist you. Go and find your sister, for she is the only one who can stop those monsters from destroying this world," he said, his breath shortening. His time was coming to a close. "No, I won't leave you, Nagato. You are all I have left. I won't leave you. I can't leave you," she said as tears started streaming. The feeling of a hand on her face drew her out of her depressed trance. Looking at Nagato, she saw a smile on his face. Something that hadn't happened since the formation of the Akatsuki. "Konan, you are the most important person in my life. I'm sorry that I tried to lead you down the dark path that I followed. When I pass on, the responsibility of taking care of this world falls to you. Only you can sense the power that your sister holds, so go. Find her and preserve peace for this world," Nagato said before looking to the sky and smiling. With those last words, Nagato Uzumaki died. Konan watched as her oldest friend died right in front of her. As his eyes closed for the last time, she tried to shake him awake. She yelled at him, screamed at him, and begged him to wake up, but it did no good. After hours of mourning and eventually burying Nagato, she began to leave AIM. Before burying Nagato, she had removed and destroyed his eyes. Only he would be able to use the eyes of God, she made sure of it. Reaching the gates of AIM, Konan strengthened her resolve and drew in everything she had to sense her sister's power. It took about an hour before she locked onto it. "For Nagato, I will help you save the world, sister. Here I come, Sarah." Konohagakure no Sato, Uchiha Estate. Itachi was having a nice dream about Paki when he was awakened rather abruptly. Opening his eyes, he was met with the sight of something that made Itachi jump up and nearly scream. A snake-like creature that looked to be around 7 feet total length was coiled on his bed. Before he could think about how to handle the situation, the creature performed a, to say the least, unexpected action. It spoke. "Itachi Uchiha," it asked, gaining only a slight nod from a still-on-guard Itachi. "I have been sent by my superiors to inform you that Naruto Uzumaki will be missing for at the most 2 months. He is currently training with our kind in our realm. Naruto will send weekly reports to you and your Hokage on his status, and you may relay any questions you may have for him through the messenger. Also, Naruto said to tell Yakumo not to be mad and that he will make it up to her when he returns. Have I explained the message clearly? The creature asked. Itachi once again nodded and watched in awe as the creature evaporated into mist. What just happened was the major question on Itachi's mind before he sat down on his bed. Sitting down, he felt something wet on his bed. Getting up, he looked at the mattress and saw that the mist that had been left by the creature was so thick that it soaked his sheets. Sighing, Itachi gathered his sheets and started walking to the drying machine. Immediately after exiting his room, Sasuke exited his room, which was right across from Itachi's. When Sasuke met Itachi's gaze, it slowly traveled to what his older brother was carrying, making his eyes widen. Upon seeing Itachi carrying wet sheets, Sasuke started laughing loudly, muttering in between laughs about his older brother wetting the bed. The laughter awoke his parents, who also came across the sight of Itachi with wet sheets in his arms and caused the two to join in the laughter. While the Uchiha family was entertained at his expense, a storm cloud formed over Itachi and he promised that Naruto would get punished harshly for this when he returned. Namikaze Estate. Minato lay in bed with his wife in his arms, both sleeping peacefully, but like Itachi were soon awakened by movement on their bed. As the two slowly woke up, they were, to put it lightly, shocked at the snake-like creature in front of them. Unlike Itachi, when Minato screamed, as did Kushina, how Menma and Narumi were able to sleep through the scream was a mystery. When Minato and Kushina's shock died down, the creature spoke. Minato Namikaze and Kushina Namikaze, I have been sent to inform you of recent events involving your son Naruto. He has traveled to our realm and is now training with my superiors. His training should take at most 2 months, and he shall send weekly reports to inform you of his status. Any messages you wish relayed to him can be done so by simply telling the messenger. Have I explained the message in a clear and understandable manner? The creature asked, getting a nod from the two, who were still getting over the shock of waking up to an unidentified creature in their bed. Disappearing in a shroud of mist, the creature left the husband and wife to digest what had just happened. When the two finally broke down what they had just been told, they turned to face one another. What? The two shouted, which still didn't wake Menma or Narumi. Realm of the serpents. A general thought of what serpents were was that of a bloodthirsty monster that kills and eats everything that it finds in the most painful and brutal ways possible. Obviously their environment would reflect that. The sky would be blood red, there would be nothing but red in the water, the land would look like that of a battlefield. This couldn't be further from the truth. Naruto stood in awe at the beauty of the world around him. The sky was clear, the grass was healthy and green, and the great lake that surrounded the land sparkled. Its color the most blue that he had ever seen any source of water. It was a paradise, an oasis, and for some reason a small part of Naruto was sad. His sadness stemmed from the fact that his world would never look like this. It would never be this beautiful. Naruto was drawn away from his thoughts as Levios started moving. Speeding up to catch up with him, Naruto continued to examine the environment. There were serpents in the water, and there were serpents that were just laying on the ground, each different sizes. It seemed that Levios was larger than all of them. The serpent and ninja came to a stop in a clearing of grass with a small pool of water in the area. Turning around and looking into Naruto's eyes as if searching for something, Levios watched the reaction of Naruto before speaking up. This will be your training ground. Here is where I will teach you water and lightning ninjutsu. It is also where we will learn to work together as summoner and summon. I won't have those pathetic excuses for summons like the toads or snakes being more feared than the legend of the serpents. We will train hard to strike fear into our enemies. Any questions? The serpent asked. Naruto thought over what Levios had said before coming up with a few questions to ask. Why only water and lightning jutsu? I don't even know what affinity I am, he asked. I can sense your chakra as well as what type of affinity you have. It is very convenient considering that those two are mine and my father's specialties, Levios replied. Naruto nodded before asking another question. What do you mean by working together as summoner and summon? I thought that I summon you in serious fights and you take over. Levios just sighed. No, that is not the case. You have seen how the toads work with their summoner, yes? He asked, getting a nod from Naruto. We shall work together in tandem, strengthening each other's jutsu and one day being able to use spiritual mode. Before you ask, it is a form in which you and I will form one being together temporarily with access to incredible power that dwarfs that of any summon. That is the power of the serpents. Levios finished leaving Naruto's jaw wide open. Konohagakure no Sato, Team 11 training ground. Itachi was at the training ground thinking about how he was going to break it to his team that Naruto had left for 2 months. How he would break it to Yakumo, who he had heard just yesterday became the boy's girlfriend. He sighed, this was not something he was looking forward to. As his thoughts wandered off, he put it on hold when he heard Sasuke and Yakumo entering the training ground. As the two came to face him, Yakumo started looking around for what Itachi could only assume was Naruto. "Okay team, I have some rather important news," he said before being interrupted by Yakumo, who quickly asked, "Shouldn't we wait on Naruto, sensei?" causing Itachi to sigh. "Yakumo, please let me finish before speaking out of turn," he asked, which gained a sheepish look and quick nod from the young genjutsu prodigy. "The Chunin exams are taking place in 2.5 months. It is a series of tests used to attain whether or not you are worthy of being Chunin. I want each of the members of Team 11 to enter. It is ultimately your choice, but I believe that you are more than ready to gain the promotion. As for Naruto, he will be gone for the next 2 months, he said, quickly looking at Yakumo to see her reaction. Yakumo's eye began to twitch violently. "What did you say, Itachi-sensei?" she asked in a cold voice, and Itachi could swear he saw the Shinigami standing right behind her, causing him to lightly sweat. "He has left for 2 months to train with his summon. I did not know he even had a summon, but it assured me that he would come back stronger. It also said to tell you that Naruto is very sorry and that he will make it up to you," the Uchiha finished. Yakumo's face immediately began to go multiple shades of red and an inferno was taking place in her eyes. "That asshole. I just became his girlfriend and he immediately ditches me? Oh, he is going to receive a very well-deserved punishment when he gets back. A rusted kunai maybe? Some salt and a hot piece of metal to make the cut hurt and cauterize it and then do it again? Yes, perfect. Ha 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 ha," laughed Yakumo in a maniacal manner that caused Sasuke and Itachi to sweat drop. Sasuke didn't really care that Naruto was on a training trip. Sure, he would miss his best friend, but in the ninja world you've gotta do what you've gotta do. After Yakumo stopped her musings about the hundreds of punishments she could inflict on her boyfriend, Itachi regained control of the conversation. "Anyway, while Naruto is gone, Yakumo, I will be teaching you how to intensify your genjutsu and also work on creating some genjutsu with you," he said, making Yakumo's eyes go wide and completely forget about Naruto's training trip. To be able to create a genjutsu with Itachi Uchiha, the best genjutsu user in the whole village, was a dream come true for any genjutsu user. Itachi then turned to Sasuke. "Sasuke, I will be letting you sign the Crow contract and teaching you more ninjutsu to go along with it. We will also work on using and maturing your Sharingan." This statement made Sasuke go wide-eyed, much like Yakumo. He would be able to gain a summon just like his older brother. Sasuke noted in the back of his mind that he should thank Naruto for going on his little trip. Team 7 training ground. Menma was locked in a taijutsu battle with his teammate Sakura Haruno for today's practice. Sakura, for lack of better words, was getting her ass kicked. She had never been one to physically train, she considered herself more of an intellectual. At this moment, she was seriously despising the fact that she chose looking good over building herself for the profession she had chosen. That thought process ended when Menma landed a vicious right hook to her face, knocking her to the ground. The match should have ended there, but Menma quickly followed up by kicking Sakura in the stomach multiple times before he was stopped by his mother. "Menma, what the hell was that? You had already won," Kushina yelled furiously while without using a seal sent a shadow clone to get Sakura to the hospital. Menma scoffed at the question. "She was an enemy. If you ask me, she's lucky I didn't use my kunai," he responded, gaining a nod from Narumi, a questioning look from Kakashi, and an even more furious look from Kushina. "That's just it, Menma, she wasn't an enemy and this wasn't a real battle. That was your teammate and it was a taijutsu-only spar. Menma, I have no idea what has gotten into you and your sister these past few days, but I've made my decision. If something like this happens again, I will have to recommend to your father that both of your ninja license be suspended," she said, taking no joy from this conversation. Menma and Narumi both held shocked looks on their faces. Kakashi would have been shocked as well had he not seen the dark transformation that the two kids that he had watched since infancy were undergoing. It concerned him greatly that Menma disregarded his teammate so casually, but to be honest, he wasn't the only one in question. On the team's last mission, which took place in the newly named Land of Spring, Narumi had suggested leaving Sakura behind to slow down a number of attackers when she injured her leg. The brother and sister were developing a darker mentality that was for certain. How dangerous it would be remained in question. Are you kidding me? We're the two strongest genin in Konoha, you can't do that. Is this because of that loser Naruto? Menma yelled. Ever since the clan failure had come back to Konoha, things had been different. His mom and dad were calling he and his sister out on everything. After all of the years of saying how great the two were going to be, it seemed that only their godfather Jiraiya believed in them now. Their parents had started saying that they were too confident and didn't think things through. They needed compassion for others, they needed to learn humility, they needed to know the purpose of self-sacrifice. All of this started because of the return of Naruto. Without him, everything would be perfect and they would be recognized as the perfect shinobi that they were. That's why he and Narumi had been meeting and discussing ways to get rid of the cause of their suffering. Menma and Narumi knew that killing Naruto in broad daylight may cause their parents to hate them more, so they kept planning new ways to kill their former brother. Kushina looked at her children. She was deeply concerned and saddened at what they were becoming. It was her fault. She had let them turn into these things that she could no longer recognize. All Kushina wanted was for her family to come together as one, but it seemed as divided as ever. Naruto acknowledged her as his mom, which made her happy beyond belief. But Menma and Narumi seemed hostile towards the very idea of Naruto returning to the Namikaze estate. After shaking her head, she simply said, "Training is over for today," before walking to the hospital to see her student. Kakashi simply shook his head in disappointment before vanishing in a storm of leaves, leaving Menma and Narumi to fester in their anger. They were the protectors of the village from the Kyuubi, the children of the Hokage, and deserved to be treated with the utmost respect, not chastised like children. It was this moment right here that the siblings made their decision that somehow they would kill Naruto and anyone who stood in their way. He had disrespected them and caused others to stop believing in them. He was the reason that so many were now reluctant to treat them as great as they deserved to be treated. Once they killed Naruto, the villagers would praise their names and the ninja would bow to them. It would start with Konoha and wouldn't end until the entire world bowed to them as the deities they were. Hospital. Sakura lay in bed with bruises on her face, arms, and chest. The doctor had told her that she had a sprained wrist, a concussion, and 2 broken ribs. While thinking about her injuries, she noticed the door open and was surprised to see her red-headed sensei followed by Tsunade, the head of the hospital. When both sat down, Kushina was the first to speak. "Sakura, I cannot express enough how sorry I am for what happened today. I should have stepped in sooner and I should have trained you better. I also should have recognized how unstable Menma has become. I truly am sorry, Sakura," she said before bowing to the shock of the girl. After getting over her shock, Sakura simply responded, "It's okay, Kushina-sensei." Kushina shook her head violently. "No, Sakura, it's not okay. Because of me, you're lying in a hospital bed with serious injuries from a team spar. While walking over here, I came to a conclusion on a few things, one of which being that I can no longer be your sensei," she said, getting a saddened look from the genin. Kushina quickly continued, "Luckily, I have found a teacher who I believe will be perfect for you," she said with a smile. Sakura looked confused until Tsunade waved and spoke up. "Hello, Sakura. Kushina has told me that you have talent in chakra control and are very intelligent. I think that with some hard work you could be a great combat medic, and I would like to show you how." The medic finished with a smile. A speechless Sakura could only smile and nod. Kushina looked at the sight with feelings of both happiness and sadness. "Sakura, you have the potential to be a great kunwachi, and my only regret is that I couldn't be the teacher that you deserved. I hope you know that while I won't be your sensei anymore, you can come to me with anything and I will try to help you as best I can." "I'm proud of you, Sakura," said Kushina. Before she could get up and leave, she was pulled into a hug from her former genin. It was a heartwarming moment and Kushina returned the hug, both the Junin and genin letting tears fall. Tsunade looked at the scene with a smile. The medical genius had a feeling that Sakura would become a great kunwachi and knew that she could get her there. Hokage's office. Minato was in his office trying to conquer today's paperwork when his wife walked in with a serious look that promised more paperwork on her face. "Kushina, is something wrong?" he asked. Kushina was hesitant and was obviously thinking hard about something. "Kushina," he said, knocking his wife out her trance. Regaining her composure, Kushina straightened herself and began the serious conversation. "Minato, I need to schedule psych evaluations for Menma and Narumi, and I have placed Sakura in a full apprenticeship with Tsunade, so she will no longer be on Team 7 inches," she said, making Minato sigh in disappointment. He had known of his children's growing instability but hadn't thought it was this bad. Nodding at the requests, he asked, "Anything else?" which resulted in Kushina simply shaking her head and leaving. Being Hokage could be a very rewarding position, and it could be a very tiresome and uncomfortable position. Seeing a batch of genin grow into great ninja, watching the happy faces of the villagers and knowing that they believed in you, being respected by the village as a whole, all rewards of making it to such a position. Moments like these, though, were some of the disappointments of the job. Seeing members of the shinobi forces become unstable or unfit for their job, his children nonetheless, was extremely disappointing as a Hokage and saddening as a father. He had made many mistakes in his life, but none more than in his role as a father. He had made his firstborn son estranged from the family by putting a prophecy above his duties as a father. It was a miracle that Naruto had forgiven him, but he wasn't the only one to suffer from it. Menma and Narumi had been raised as if they were ninja in the world. What they had become now were self-centered, egotistical, selfish, cruel, and unstable kids. All of this was the result of his decisions as a father. Realm of the Serpents. Naruto was standing in the clearing that Levios had told him about learning water and lightning ninjutsu yesterday. Levios came out of the water nearby and slithered in front of him before expanding and rising to his true height. Naruto had to jump back a few times to give Levios space to grow, and when he was finished, Naruto stood in awe. The serpent had grown to its height of 90 feet. Without lowering his head to Naruto, Levios spoke at a volume that the human was able to hear even so far below. "Naruto, by the end of this training period you will be able to summon me on land and my father in water. It will take more concentration and chakra than you have ever summoned before. It will hurt badly, but you will come out of it much stronger than before. But before we can begin, you have demons that need to be faced. To do this, you must go to the Stone of Sanctity," he said, turning his head and looking at the lake, which gained a questioning look from Naruto. "You will swim to the center of the lake and dive down. The stone will reveal itself to you when your summoning tattoo begins to glow. When your arm glows, the stone will glow as well. Follow that light to confront your demons and find the answers that you seek," he said before beginning to coil himself. Naruto followed the instructions of Levios and took his shirt and pants off before stepping into the water. It took 5 minutes before Naruto reached the center of the lake. When he reached the center, Naruto took multiple breaths of air before diving down. As he dived down, he realized that he was able to see perfectly in the water and that this water felt almost natural to him. Disregarding his thoughts, he continued to dive deeper. After around 3 minutes of being underwater, Naruto's need for air began to make itself known, but he brushed it off. After another minute, his chest began burning and his lungs begged for air, but he continued to swim deeper. 20 seconds later, his vision started to become blurry, and that's when it happened. His arm glowed, lighting up everything and gaining a similar glow 5 feet away. Fighting the need to breathe a little longer, he reached the glowing light that was the Stone of Sanctity. It was a beautiful purple stone the size of Naruto's hand. Grabbing the stone, the environment changed in an instant. The serpent summoner was no longer underwater and his body no longer begged for oxygen. Instead, he was in an area unrecognizable. All he could see was a multitude of colors as far as the eye could see. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice asked beside Naruto. Turning slowly to meet the voice, Naruto was shocked beyond belief when the voice was revealed to be his master, Sarah. Unable to speak or close his mouth, Sarah smiled at his reaction. After a small giggle from Sarah, Naruto was broken from his unresponsive state. "Am I dead?" he asked, which received a shake of the head from his master. "No, my student, you're not dead. The stone takes all of the experiences and memories of your life into account and brings you face to face with the ones that are holding you back. Apparently I've been causing you some distress," she said with a smile. I need you to tell me everything, Naruto said with a serious look on his face which made the smile fade from Sarah's face. Everything as in what? The stone may know your experiences but I'm kind of dead. I mean I check in from time to time but between poker with the Shodem Hokage and pranks on the other swordsmen, I'm kind of busy, she said with a laugh that quickly ended after seeing the look on Naruto's face. Sorry, bad joke. Okay, so you want to know about the group that Iliel said I was in. They are called the Shinigami's Blade. It's a group of the entire world's greatest swordsmen. They only keep 5 members at a time if memory serves me. I joined because they told me that together we could save the world and keep it safe. Like a fool, I believed that bullshit promise. About a month in, I realized what they were. A group of monsters who wanted to rule the world by fear. They never wanted peace, they wanted servitude. And though I hate to say it, it's possible for them. You see, when I decided to leave, I barely made it out alive. After healing up and staying off their radar, I searched through every country of the elemental nations for a successor because I knew that it was impossible for me to stop them. I had almost given up until you asked me to teach you, she said with a smile. I sensed it from the conviction in your voice and saw it in your eyes. You had the will and determination needed to become my successor and later down the line, the savior of the world. Naruto was shocked. If what Sarah was saying was true, then the world was in an incredible amount of danger. Sarah, if these swordsmen are as powerful as you say, then how can you expect me to stand a chance against them? He asked, which gained a laugh from the blue-haired swordsman. Because Naruto, you will be the greatest swordsman of all of us. You hold the legacy of the most legendary swordsman in all of existence. I told you before my death that you were the 11th in the line of history's strongest swordsmen, each one stronger than the last. You will surpass me, Naruto. You will surpass me and every swordsman in existence, she said with a proud smile. Naruto slightly blushed at the expectations of his teacher. Sarah, is there like a name for this line of swordsmen I'm part of? He asked, which had honestly been a question on his mind since the night he gained his sword. Sarah smiled and replied, nope, which caused Naruto to fall face down. When Naruto sat back up, Sarah looked at him with a serious look. Naruto, there is a scroll that I left in the care of the serpents. It contains the sword techniques of each of our group's swordsmen. Read them, learn them, and reach your full potential. I believe in you, little brother, she said before fading away with a smile. Naruto smiled as well before the light around him began to fade and his surroundings revealed itself. He was in front of the stone of sanctity, but it and his tattoo were no longer glowing. Realizing that his time with the stone was up, he swam to the surface. Upon reaching Levios, Naruto spoke loud enough for the serpent to hear. Levios, I am ready to learn both the ways of the serpents and the ways of my past swordsmen. Which gained a slight nod and what looked like a smile from the serpent.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.